found this, we're filming this.
Just need to check this. Best is one overall.
Attorney and
Yeah, it's.
so I you know, wow.
Yep.
But
But
for 3 minutes.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you. Come here,
3
Floyd.
minutes.
give my dad a really nice.
So,
I don't have anything to do with it.
I'm with you.
Oh,
If Brett hit that right there, the button, you can hit this next, and you cancel it. Just like how Alan, he hit it.
It's hard to stay right.
It'll show his name up
yeah,
there.
and then I just hit
Hit
it.
this.
no, he's in
Yes, you can turn him off. Turn him off.
Got it.
Yes, Serenity Gardens. Oh,
Okay.
that's right. You told me. I followed. I was right up.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to bring this morning's meeting of PSTA to order, please. And if you all have cell phones on the dais, please make sure you have them turned off. Thank you. So, Commissioner Barkley, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, thank you, everyone, for taking your time to come be with us this morning. We're going to have an opportunity for everyone who wishes to speak to do so. So if you do want to speak under public comment, make sure you fill out, see Rachel up here, make sure you fill out one of these green cards. I do have two right now, although I don't see a name. Oh, there, here we go. Andrew Greenbaugh, please come forward and state your name for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes. Over here, please. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you? My name is Andrei Garankov. I work at Raymond James over on the Carillon Loop, and I and a number of my coworkers rely on the buses that stop in the Carillon Loop to commute to work. So a number of us were disappointed to find out 2 weeks ago that Bus 11 would no longer service our loop. I wanted to remind you guys that Raymond James has over 4,000 employees in that location, and we have several other companies on Carillon as well. Anecdotally, from what I've seen, this is one of the stops where we actually do have riders who try to board the bus. A lot of the other stops for Bus 11 do not as we go down the highway. So I would urge the board to reconsider the decision to cancel service at this location for Route 11. Thank you.
Thank you, Andre, for your comments. Hold on just one moment, please. Mr. Miller, would you like to address that issue?
Sure, and thank you for coming with those comments. For your information, you probably maybe know this, and for the board's information, PSTA did earlier in February reduce the Route 11. It still runs, but it does no longer runs to Carillon. Routes 97, Routes 98, and Routes 58, which was actually expanded to take over for the 11, all still serve the Raymond James stop. Throughout 2016, the average boardings at the Raymond James bus stop was 3 per day, and it has in 2017 it's now been averaging about 1 rider a day. We think the commuter services, the 97 and 98, and now an expanded 58, can serve that pretty well. And then we also, of course, have Direct Connect, our Uber partnership, which you can still access the Route 11 through a connection right here to the PSTA facility. So that was what we are experimenting with. Obviously, we're going to monitor it and see how ridership does and if it's a success. And you know, maybe we'll look at it in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And please keep us informed about how that works out for your employees over there. And also, good morning, Mr. Rask. Please come forward and state your name and address for the record, please.
Good morning, Tom Rask, unincorporated Pinellas County.
I have to, again, talk about the plunging ridership at PSTA, because it's now accelerating. And just so the viewers at home know, when you come here, you have to address the board. But I try to look into the camera in order to talk to people at home, so they realize what's going on here. The PSTA metric, total fixed route passenger trips, think of that as bus trips. That dropped in January by 9.53%. But there's more to this, because if you look further down in your operating statistics report for January, you will see that the number of revenue miles rose 1.8%. So PSTA is driving further miles, trying to pick up more riders and getting fewer riders. If you adjust it for revenue miles, the decline in ridership is 11.5%. That's January 2017 compared to January 2016, which brings us for the year, the 4 months of your fiscal year so far, to a decline according to this. I'm going to estimate it at over 10%. It's a little over 10%. There may be more to it than this, though. I sent an email to Ms. Borchers this morning. It didn't go out for some reason yesterday. I meant to send it last night. But the metrics that PSTA reports to your board is this fixed route passenger trips, which is different than the metric used by the Federal Transit Administration. They have a metric called MB, which basically is bus trips, not door-to-door. And PSTA consistently reports a higher number to you, the FRPT, fixed route passenger trips, than the MB metric that it reports to the FTA. In fact, in the last calendar year, that metric that they reported to you was 4.5% higher than the MB metric. When PSTA does not report, the FTA estimates the ridership for that month. There were 2 instances last year where where the PSTA did not report on time. They reported the next month. And when that was in July and November, and when PSTA did not report the MB metric, it was estimated by the FTA. Those estimates are a lot lower than the numbers that PSTA comes in with. Now, I'm bringing this up publicly because your agency counsel, Mr. Zimmett, directed staff years ago to not answer questions from me. So I come here and bring up the questions here. I'm hoping Ms. Borchers will answer this. But my message to you is the ridership is plunging at a record rate. You should do what you promised the voters 4 years ago, which is to cut the routes, cut by 30% in order to save money. Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
spare the taxpayers.
Thank you, Mr. Rask. All right, seeing no further, oh, here we go. We have one more. Tony Love. Good morning.
Good
You
morning.
didn't check which item you are speaking about, so just feel free.
I'm sorry, I was rushing filling out the form. I'm here to speak about the discontinuation of Route 44 to the Housing Authority. By the way, excuse me, good morning. My name is Tony Love. I'm the CEO of the St. Petersburg Housing Authority. And I'm here to talk about a discontinuation of a service to our office, our central office. We serve over 3,400 families annually, and we were informed late December, January. I met with a few of your staff members that that route was being discontinued. It's now been served by Route 74, which is a half mile away from our central office. Therefore, we have families with children and elderly walking a half mile to get service. And I come here because we met with your staff, and they indicated they did a survey that indicated that they had 0 ridership in a period of time. And that was January 11th. And I randomly picked up the phone while Mr. Levine and Mr. last year were in my office and asked, how many clients do we have in the office? And they said 8. And I then asked, how many people use poll to see how many people use Route 44? There were 5 sitting in the lobby. At a random, pick up the phone. But for a long period of time, they're saying, allegedly, that we have 0 ridership. That is not true. I also have a document signed in 2013 that said that this previous board, PSTA, would put a shelter at that office for people to use it while they waited for the bus. In the summer, it's very hot, and occasionally it rained here in Florida. But that never happened. Today, we have no shelter. And lastly, I have another letter in 2015 where the chairperson, Ms. Davis, wrote this board and asked that you not discontinue Route 44, and it was not discontinued, but now the decision has been made, and currently we're not being served by Route 44. We're being served by 74. And I spoke with your staff, and they said the decision had been made, and the earliest, if it could be reinstated, would be June or July. I'm asking this board to consider reinstating immediately. There are families that are using the service. They're walking, they're bringing their children, they're being endangered. It's not a busy freeway, but we do have an industrial park that the frontage is on Gandy, but behind us, it's an industrial area. There's a lot of large trucks and vehicles moving in that circle. So it is not the safest route for them to be walking. So we hope we could get some consideration to reinstate that. I know your staff says that the cost is very high, but I think the need for the low-income families, moderate low-income families that we serve should prevail. And I understand it's a cost for ridership, just like subsidized housing and everything, but I ask that you find a way to serve the families. There was some discussion about Uber and other secondary transportation modes to get them to the bus stop and things of that nature, but that's a cost also. Most of our families don't have that type of auxiliary money to use to catch a bus, to get to a bus stop. And lastly, Route 44, I believe, I was told that it came more of a direct route for our residents that we serve. And 74, you have to take a transfer station and then get on another bus. So it's difficult for some of the families to get to our office. We ask them to come in unless they have a change in income annually. Many of them come in 3 or 4 times a year. So I know the ridership is better than what is being alleged.
Mr. Love, your time is up, so
Thank
thank
you.
you for concluding. But how about this? Brad, could he please meet with one of the staff and find a solution for these folks? Because this is the population that we have a mission to serve.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. So I see Cassandra Borchers, our Chief Development Officer, back there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much for your
Yeah,
comments.
and if we could get the shelter, it would greatly help them.
I heard you on that, too. Cassandra will help you back there. She can fix anything, right, Cassandra? Thank you very much for coming. All right, anyone else in the audience wish to speak during this public comment time? Anyone? Okay, we're moving on now. We have an important recognition this morning. Brad, would you like to recognize these 2 important members of our team, bus operators Philip Scott and Robert Letva, who are both retiring after many years of serving us. So,
Jeff Thompson, our Director of Transportation, will do the honors.
there you go.
Thank you. Hello, board members. Jeff Thompson, Director of
Good morning.
Transportation. I am truly honored to present to you this morning and introduce 2 of our bus operators that have retired this month. First is Philip Scott, who has been driving a bus in Pinellas County since April of 1985, when the bus fare was 35 cents and you could get a transfer for a dime.
Wow.
Philip was a fixture on the bus routes 4, 14, and 23, in addition to working on the extra board for a while. He was known as the driver with the hat by his customers, who did not know his name, and everybody else just called him Scotty. He is an avid gardener and a woodworker who likes to make things out of wood, and Phil and his wife Janice have been married for 40 years. They have 2 children, Dadine and Terrell, and 3 grandchildren. Phil said he likes to travel and will be taking a couple of trips very soon. Also, I'm pleased to introduce Robert Leva, we call him Bob Leva, who is another dedicated bus operator who is retired from PSTA. Bob has been at PSTA since August of 1991, starting as a part-time operator. He worked on the extra board, and more recently, you might have seen him on the evening Suncoast Beach trolley run, as he usually closed up the trolley route for us at night. Bob came to PSTA from New York, where he drove buses in the city out of the Port Authority in Manhattan. He is married to Adele, 34 years, and they have 3 children, Billy, Matt, and Jeremy, and 3 grandchildren. Bob likes to go on cruises quite a bit, as he was telling me the other day, so he's going to go on a few of those real soon. And he likes to travel places where him and his family have never been before, so we wish him happy sailing and happy traveling. PSTA is proud to have had Phil Scott and Bob Leva serve the public for a combined total of over 60 years in their careers here at PSTA. We will miss them, and we wish them their best in their retirements. Won't you join me in congratulating them? Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen, for your very long and distinguished career. We're very proud of you. And now we are on committee updates, and Gloria Levitt-Corrigan, good morning. Welcome. Would you like to give your report, please?
Is that, okay, there we go. Can you hear me? Yes, okay, good. Okay, good morning, Chairman Long, Mr. Miller, and esteemed board members. The track committee meeting was held on February 20th of this year, and first I'd like to thank board members Bill Johnson and Josh Schulman for attending our meeting. Thank you very much. The first 2 information items on our agenda were from Cindy Raskin-Schmidt, the Director of Communications and Marketing of PSTA. First, she gave us an update on the Clearwater Spring Break Service promotion, which I believe she'll do here today as well. This encourages residents and visitors alike to take advantage of the free park and ride, trolley and bus service as alternatives to the wonderful drive out to Clearwater Beach. As regular transit riders, we did see very much the value of this program, this innovative program, and we've been recommending it to our friends, family, and neighbors. We were also very, very appreciative of the strong marketing plan to promote the service and benefit to beach visitors. Then she gave us the latest information on the Flamingo Fairs implementation, and we were invited to be Flamingo card testers prior to the full implementation. We had a number of questions, but look forward to taking part in this important step toward better fares, better boarding, and improved regional collaboration. And to date, 7 of the committee members have already signed up to be testers for Flamingo Fair. The remainder of the meeting was devoted to discussing and selecting our track initiatives. We keep coming back to that. And as a follow-up to last year's initiative, we decided to spend a little bit more time on the safety initiative. The committee decided to develop a track safety award program for where we see good safety innovation taking place. We are going to be developing a nomination and selection process which will be proposed at our next meeting, and we hope this effort will celebrate municipalities and businesses that design and build pedestrian and rider safe access to bus stops. And then we decided to form a subcommittee for what we are calling internal issues, to have a more in-depth discussion of ways that we, as regular transit riders, can help PSTA improve its services and functions. An example of that is we talked about communication regarding service changes during road construction that are temporary service changes or during special events, so that we as riders know better what is going on. The next meeting will be held on March 13th, and as always, we invite you to attend or to watch it on video. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions, board members? Yes.
Yes.
Yes, Mr. Schulman, please be recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Not so much a question, but I did want to share that the track members were really excited about the new Flamingo. I was actually very encouraged by how eager they were to jump on that system and be the guinea pigs to try out the registration process. But one of the things that was shared was also how some of the track members are helping our non-English riders, non-English speaking riders, learn how to use PSTA. And it occurred to me, our website does have a Google Translate feature, but I don't know if we're really marketing that Google Translate feature, which can help our non-English speaking riders learn how to ride the bus. So I just wanted to bring that point up, in that it was mentioned that this is something they do regularly, that at our shelters we should share that exists, go on our site, make sure it translates properly, make sure the how to ride section is able to be translated, because not everything can, but that would help our non-English speaking riders and also our track members as well.
That is great input, Counselor or Commissioner Schulman, and it occurs to me, for those members of the commission that are here, that we might be able to help market and advertise that service to our non-speaking English people through our communications department, who has the ability to translate everything into the different languages that we find ourselves a bit challenged with. So that could be another way to get the word out, Brent, just so you know. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? No? Okay, Commissioner Johnson?
Thank you. Local Coordinating Board update for PSTA. Okay, now can you hear me? The LCB met February 20th at Forward Pinellas offices in Clearwater. Jody Armstrong from the Disability Achievement Center gave a very informative presentation about all the different programs and services in Pinellas and Pasco County. Sarah Caper led the annual public hearing, and Ross gave the Community Transportation Coordinators update. Sarah Ward announced her retirement this week after 32 years with Forward Pinellas, the Pinellas MPO. And she is now and has always been one of the foundation pieces of our government in Pinellas County. She's an awesome person, and I'm happy for her, but the loss is tremendous. I updated the LCB on Brad and Pat Gerard and my trip to Tallahassee earlier this year during the legislative session, and to advocate for more support for the TD program. Ross updated the committee on the latest from the state budget, which looks like, and I hope it's still today, TD funding for Pinellas will be about the same, with no major cuts this coming year, thankfully. But unfortunately, no increases to go with our increasing TD ridership demand. While we were talking to the legislators and senators and everyone in Tallahassee that we could grab, we explained what our program was. And most of the state doesn't even know what TD is, how it works, what the program can do for their community. So they really want to learn about it. And I think when they learn about it, we'll have a more positive response to our pleas for assistance. Finally, the LCB needs help from the PSTA board members to fill several vacancies on our board. State law dictates the makeup of the local coordinating board. We need to identify a citizen over the age of 60 to replace Vivian Peters, who we recently lost. And you probably remember Vivian. She's always over there on the side. She's here at every meeting, and she passed away, and we're going to miss her. A citizen who uses public transportation, and a second citizen that can be a transit user or not. Please refer anyone who might be interested to Sarah Caper. I know I saw Sarah, it's right back there, with Forward Pinellas for more information. The next LCB meeting will be May the 15th. Thank you.
Very good report. Thank you very, very much. Mr. Johnson, would you please give the report on Forward Pinellas?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I was planning on opening my report with the accolades for Miss Sarah Ward at MPO at Forward Pinellas, and that was taken away from me, so I'll just skip right by that, but she's done a great job, and thank you. The Forward Pinellas group met on February 14th, Valentine's Day, and some of the items that were brought up at that meeting. In order to comply with Federal Highway Administration guidelines, the Forward Pinellas Board adopted performance measures and targets for injuries and fatalities in Pinellas County for 2018. Since the FHWA discourages aspirational targets of 0 deaths and recommends data-driven and realistic numbers, the Forward Pinellas Board adopted aspirational measures, which are below the current trend line, but still will be reasonable and hopefully realistic. Additional performance measures and targets will be adopted later this year, again following the federal guidelines and requirements. I opened with this because I believe this is very important in that we have higher rates of road injuries and fatalities than other areas of this country. The second item was a presentation by Scott Pringle with Jacobs on the, as the latest update to the Regional Transportation Feasibility Plan. I suspect we will see the same presentation later in this meeting. There were 2 things that I noted in that presentation to Forward Pinellas. First was the presentation no longer included statistics relating to projected regional traffic congestion. And the second was the evaluation process to meet FTA's $11 cost per ride target needed for federal funding. So I hope you'll cover those when you make that presentation. Also at the meeting, T-BARTA Director Ray Sharmarty spoke briefly about the Memorandum of Understanding that has been distributed to local transportation agencies. This is the same document that's on our agenda and we'll be discussing later in this meeting. I would note that the Forward Pinellas Executive Director noted a desire for the MOU to clarify the language regarding roles and responsibilities of the MPOs and hope to have common language to submit to T-BARTA for their coordination. So we're kind of got a moving target with several things going on at the same time. The last item that I would highlight to this board is that the Forward Pinellas Board met in a strategic planning workshop earlier this year. And at the February meeting, the Executive Director brought forward several elements that were identified as strategies, but noted that they would require additional resources and could result in rising millage. Now, Forward Pinellas does not have the millage cap problem that PSTA has, and the decision will be made at future board meetings, probably in May, after staff comes back with some scenario options. So I'd be happy to answer any questions, Madam Chair, if board members have. Otherwise, that's my report.
Thank you. Councilor Johnson, any further discussion or questions or comments from the rest of the board? No? Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, and now I am prepared to give a report on the update from T-Bar. And I think I shared with you in a previous meeting that the chair's wish is for the policy committee to vet all of the agenda items and issues before the policy committee. And with that in mind, the policy committee approved the job description for the new executive director, and we're moving forward with public engagement for the recommended transit feasibility plan. It is the first step, and it's important to keep in mind that this is the first time ever that FDOT is willing to use road dollars for transit. One voice, one mission. And so as it relates to the policy committee, when we meet this next month, we're going to be vetting and deciding and to make a recommendation on who our recruiter will be for the new executive director. But I did want to share that at our regular full T-BARTA board meeting last Friday, it was a very spirited and robust conversation that we had with a lot of discussion about the CSX rail line and how we have missed the boat with the feasibility plan to include CSX. And quite frankly, that is not exactly a true picture, because it was pointed out by Secretary Gwynn that they're happy to include CSX as long as the 3 MPOs are making that recommendation and they are speaking with one voice and one message. And because that is not happening, we are moving forward with this feasibility plan. And again, there are a lot of transportation options that will be included in this plan as we take public input going forward. And it remains to be seen. We have a whole more year to hear from the public about what they want and how they'd like to see us maybe pay for the things that they want. We all know they're not free. So the conversation is ongoing, and I am excited to be on this board, and I think that we are making enormous progress considering where we started 3 or 4 years ago. And so please stay tuned for the next TMA meeting, which is coming up very quickly, and don't you love all the acronyms that we use all the time? All right, so with that said.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
If I may? I took the time to attend the T-BARTA meeting, found it very interesting. I agree with the spirited discussion comment. One of the observations that I had were that there were, I think, at least 8 members of the public that spoke, and the members of the public were critical of the current plan, but they were critical for a whole bunch of reasons that ranged from, well, we really should be doing rail, to this, the BRT is not robust enough, to we really shouldn't be expanding the footprint of transit through there. And what I felt was missing from that discussion was really a discussion or grounding on the need that we're trying to solve in this, with this journey. And so I would hope that that could be addressed more thoroughly in the future, because I think that might help shape the discussion. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Johnson, for your comments. And I listened very carefully to the input from the public, and there seems to be a disconnect in understanding the different roles. That was my takeaway. most of the comments made from the public were very pertinent to Hillsborough County only. And those issues, as was recommended, really are in the responsibility scope of Hart over there, just like our issues here as it relates to our bus and local moving around is handled by PSTA. So again, keeping in mind this is a regional board, our focus is to take care of the regional issues, getting people back and forth across the bridge to work, to go for leisure travel, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's the scope of the mission. And if we could please move on to the consent agenda, that'd be great. Anybody want to pull anything from consent? Anyone? No? May I have a motion, please?
Move approval.
Second? Did I hear a second?
I'll second if I didn't
Okay.
make the motion.
It's been moved and seconded. Rachel, you've got that right. Would you please open the voting card? Goes up because I don't have mine up. Oh, wait.
I vote
Get
yes.
back on it. Okay. And we have majority voting for consent. And now we're on action items 6A. Mr. Burns, are there any questions or concerns from the board? Are you wanting to speak, Mr. Johnson?
I
No?
think I need to be turned off by you.
There we go. Go ahead.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. Al Burns, Director of Procurement. I'm really excited this morning to bring this action item before you. It shows a collaborative effort with one of the best universities in the nation, USF in Qatar. The action item, PSTA currently has a GEC contracts with 3 separate A&E firms. Utilizing Qatar benefits the authority by providing technical assistance services in a variety of areas as needed. The fiscal impact for this is none, and the recommendation is the approval is contingent upon successful negotiations on a number of legal issues between the university and PSTA and Hart's legal counsel. Approve a 5-year master agreement with USF in the amount not to exceed $300,000 to utilize Qatar for technical assistance as needed. The Finance Committee reviewed this item and recommended its approval. Just a couple of notes that I want to leave you with is there's no obligation for us to utilize this contract. It's just another, as I would phrase it, another tool in our toolbox for us to be able to utilize. Once again, it was voted unanimously by the Finance Committee, and I don't know if the Finance Chair, Mr. Barkley, has any comments he would like to add.
Thank you, Mr. Burns. So Commissioner Barkley, Mr. Burns stole your thunder. Would you
Yes,
like
he
to
did.
weigh in?
Yes, he did. Yes, the Finance Committee met on February 21st, and we unanimously approved the agreement subject to legal review, which would allow PSTA to use USF's Center for Urban Transportation Research, which is what Qatar stands for, to provide technical assistance as needed up to the amount of $300,000. There is no obligation to use Qatar, but this is another resource for PSTA.
Thank you, Mr. Barkley, for the clarification. And now may I have a motion? Are there any questions?
I'll make a
No
motion to
discussion?
approve that.
Okay. It's been moved by Mr. Barkley and seconded by Mr. Scott. Sorry, I had to. And yes, I see you, Mr. Rask. Hold on one moment, please. We are now in a discussion mode, and Mr. Rask has filled out a card and would like to speak, I am assuming, on this issue. So if you would please come forward, Mr. Rask.
Tom Rask, unincorporated Pinellas County. At a recent meeting, the chair, Ms. Long, said that she thought that there may not be anything that would ever please me. This actually pleases me. I'm actually surprised that you're doing this. It'll go a long way towards helping the public believe that this is something other, that PSTA is something other than a money grab. for the purpose of running buses, pleasing certain interest groups, and making each citizen in this county pay about $100 a year in taxes. Because that's what it is. It's upwards of $100 million a year that you're spending in this fiscal year. But I would be remiss if I didn't mention that at a recent February 5th Executive Committee meeting, Ms. Long said, quote, that Qatar is, quoting now, is too deeply entrenched in the way things are in Tampa Bay, end quote. I would say, no, they're not. It's Jacobs Engineering, Parsons Brinkerhoff, that are too deeply entrenched. There's some people in this room who are too deeply entrenched in how things are in the Tampa Bay area, not Qatar. When Ms. Long said this, Darden Rice, the immediate past chair, said, quote, they seem to bring some biases. Wow. Into the work it does. She also thought that Qatar was, quote, too quiet during Greenlight Pinellas and Go Hillsborough. No, I don't think they were too quiet at all. I think they stayed out of it as they should. All that Qatar does is bring you the data, unbiased data, which I can't say for some of those other firms. So I'm for this. And two people here, Mr. Burns and Mr. Barkley, said you're under no obligation to use this contract. Actually, you are under a moral obligation to use this contract. Because having companies like Parsons Brinkerhoff, now WSP, and Jacobs Engineering do work to basically keep them alive, keep their offices here open as they wait for big contracts to be approved. That doesn't fly with the public. They're interested parties. One thing that's wonderful about Qatar is they won't be doing the work. They won't get a several $100 million or $1 billion contract if the outcome of what they produce in a study comes to fruition. So Qatar is great. It's great you're using Qatar instead. And I'm fully in favor of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rask. And now, where I believe we're in a position to vote, would you please open the voting card, Rachel? Aren't we missing somebody?
Should be 13.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Who?
There we go.
All right, that passed unanimously, and now we are on 6B. So I see that Mr. Rask has asked to speak on this issue as well. Do you want to speak now, Mr. Rask, or do you want to wait until we're in the discussion mode of our? Okay. So the evaluation committee met and evaluated our CEO, Brad. The survey that was sent out to you, the evaluation, was completed by all 15 PSTA board members. Our personnel committee, of which I am chair, met back on January 31st to review the scores and make a recommendation on compensation adjustment based on the evaluation results. I've asked Vice Chair Joe Barkley to summarize the committee's recommendations as we discussed them during the meeting. Mr. Barkley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Personnel Committee met, which was made up of Chair Long, myself, Secretary Treasurer Pat Gerard, Darden Rice, and David Banther, and we discussed with the very positive results of the board's performance evaluation of our CEO, Brad Miller. Several key issues were cited as improvements by the board in the evaluation process, including communicating with the board and the community, showing leadership by giving up his car for 6 weeks and talking with riders as he rode public transit, implementing a performance scorecard system to focus the organization on constant improvements. The Personnel Committee ended up unanimously recommending a 4% adjustment to the CEO's compensation based on the following things. Number one, performance. Brad has shown significant improvement across the board, as noted in a strong evaluation by all board members. Two, in a mode to catch up on prior years, the CEO's average compensation adjustment over his last 6 years was only 1.1% per year, which was substantially less than comparable peers throughout the industry and other PSTA's employees' compensation changes. Number 3, there are future adjustments that will be in doubt. The committee recognized that with the upcoming vote on increased homestead exemption on PSTA's budget and local government budgets, there may be challenges to support future increases in the coming years. I want to emphasize that this was the Personnel Committee's unanimous recommendation, and Brad was not involved in that. On behalf of the committee, I would move that Brad Miller receive the 2017 CEO performance evaluation and adjust the CEO's compensation by 4% as recommended.
Thank you, Mr. Barkley, very much for that very comprehensive report. Is there a second to Mr. Barkley's motion?
Second.
Thank you, Councilor Miller. And now we are in discussion. So, Mr. Rask, if you'd like to come forward, please, and state your thoughts, comments, or opinion, whatever.
Yes. Thank you. Once again, Tom Rask, unincorporated Pinellas County. I noticed that in the review, the 2 areas where Mr. Miller scored the lowest was viable public transportation and capital investment, and I agree with that. I think the board should further ask itself, what are Mr. Miller's options? Where could he go in this current environment of declining transit across the country? Because the certain areas like New York City, it's not going down at all. So when you hear the FTA say that ridership is declining by, say, 4% per year, that means it's declining by 0 in half the country and 8% or more in other areas. I'm on the record in 2014 as saying that you should have let Mr. Miller go after green light failed. After all, his deliverable when he came here was rail. He didn't deliver it. And you yourselves are rating him low, or lowest, I should say, on viable public transportation and capital investment. What are you going to do a year from now if the January 2019 board meeting shows the ridership, the January 2019 operating statistics show another 10% decline? At what point do you say you have to go in a different direction? At what point do you say you get a bus guy, like the guy over in Polk County, or maybe Mark Esch, if you can get him? This agency needs to be totally reformed, and for that reason, I would say if you're going to keep Mr. Miller, it would be at 0 per pay increase, preferably try to find somebody else who can make the necessary changes. Because one of the things that's not in your matrix for evaluating is finding savings. In the end, you're supposed to represent the taxpayers, and you're spending $100 million a year for really no good purpose, as I can see it. Declining ridership. This fiscal year will probably be 25% down compared to 3 years ago. 25% down. Why are you increasing the revenue miles? Why aren't you looking for cost savings? So I oppose giving Mr. Miller a pay increase, and I would urge you to find somebody better suited to run this agency. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rask. And any more discussion on this issue? Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'd be interested in hearing a little bit more about the committee's recommendation for a salary increase. I see that there were some members that had suggested maybe a combination of a percent and a lump sum. But I noticed that most of the board was suggesting less than the 4% increase. So I'm I'd like to, if the members of the committee could give us a little bit more thought as to how they arrived at a 4% rather than where the rest of the board was. And did you consider a percentage increase and perhaps a lump sum as an option?
Mr. Barkley, would you like to take a stab at that?
We did discuss The idea of a lump sum, and that was not received by too many folks as being viable. We also did have an array of recommendations as far as the increased percentage, but given the fact that his prior year's percentage increase was well below the norm, the 4% number was the agreed upon percentage for recommendation.
Thank you. Commissioner Eggers, I saw your light on, and now it's not there. Are you still, oh, okay. Do you want to, go ahead, please.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you, Madam Chair. Overall, obviously, I was looking at the comparisons, and I obviously rated Brad on the low side. Thought he, over the last couple of years, there's been significant improvement in the communication areas, especially I think he makes an effort to get out and talk to the board members. I think overall, I'm somewhat concerned about the operational aspects that we're finding ourselves in today and where we're heading in the next year, potentially with reduction in revenue. The one thing that Mr. Rask did say that was intrigue to me is that that we ought to be looking at the millage rates. The millage rate that we raised to the maximum when I didn't think we needed to do it. And I know this is board direction. It's not necessarily completely a reflection on Brad, but there's been no discussion about freezing hiring or anything else. And I think we're heading into waters, and we just need to be aware of that and more cognizant of the issues that we have in front of us. Every single discussion that has been raised over the last 4 or 5 years, there's been a counter discussion and argument raised by staff here to kind of reflect the times. And I'm just overall just a little bit concerned that we're not taking into account some of the issues that transit is having in this country, in this area. We're trying to do some things from a planning perspective, and I like the idea that, some of the population estimates that we hear, we have to be doing this planning right now. But I'd like to see a little bit more aggressive action towards we either outsourcing some operations, decreasing our costs here as we go through these kind of difficult times. The other thing that Mr. Rask raised this morning, which I'd like to just know more about, not today necessarily, it's not necessarily related to the evaluation, but how we're counting ridership, how it's done nationally, and why we're different, and why should we be different. I'd just like to know a little bit more about that. So if we could see some of that, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you very much,
Oh,
Commissioner.
excuse me, one more thing.
Yeah.
I will not support the 4%. I think it is excessive. Most all of the county that I've seen is no more than 3%, and so I think that would be excessive. And again, especially in light of the fact that there are still questions about our revenue streams and where we are financially, I would not support the 4%.
Thank you, Commissioner Eggers. Commissioner Banther.
Yes, thank you. And I was on this committee, and obviously it was a little difficult for me being new on the board, rating Mr. Miller fairly. I have been a vocal opponent of a green light, but I wanted to rate him solely on my experience with him on this board. That's why my scores were what they were. And so, this time next year, I think I'll be in a better position to fully vet his performance. I recommended 3%, and then the committee came out with 4%. Only reason why I was willing to go along with that, I think, were reasons stated today, was in the past he was given 1%, which even despite my concerns of the behavior during Greenlight Pinellas, if we're going to keep an employee on, I think you have to at least have, cost of living increases. And then also with the impending homestead exemption, I don't see how we'll be in any position to give any raises next year. And so, I just want to preface that my evaluation and my comments and my situation on the personnel committee were limited because being new on the board. And then next year, I hope to be able to have a more complete picture and a complete evaluation. But I do echo the comments that we have to get in a serious cost savings mode, because I don't see how that won't pass. The homestead exemption, I know in Tarpon Springs, we're preparing for a $500,000 budget, decrease. Revenue decrease, due to this, and I assume every governing body on this board is doing the same. So I think we need to follow suit this year and begin to find ways to solve that. Usually, I would say you don't so much save your way out of a problem, you have to grow your way out of the problem. But being that we've maxed out the millage rate, I'm not so sure how we grow our way out of that problem here. So in looking towards his performance evaluation for this coming year, I'll be looking really towards the cost savings and what are we going to do to maintain our services to those most in need in light of the upcoming cuts and decrease in ridership. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your very thoughtful comments. Commissioner Schulman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe last year, and I don't know if the Personnel Committee can remind me, the percentage change last year was either 4 or 5% increase to Mr. Miller's salary. I believe I seem to recall a catch-up because there had been a lower, longer-term inflation rate on the salary. And so I'm recalling that. I don't know the exact number. But for me, I believe that we did that last year, so to catch up and to reward the results that we've seen thus far. And so I would be more inclined to, I initially had a 3% adjustment, which I thought was in line with what else is happening within the county, but also, given some other comments, be willing to support the board average of about 3.5%. And I realize this is only talking about, $1,000, $2,000 difference, in the grand scheme of things with the budget. It's not going to move the needle, but I do want to make sure that we're also being mindful of community concerns as well as being able to retain good talent as well. So I would be in favor of the 3.5. And if someone has some information on last year's increase as an illustrative point, I'd appreciate that as well.
Thank you, Mr. Schulman. And just to respond to that a bit, that point that you make, I don't see relevant in this discussion today, because the very low percentage rate that Mr. Miller received for several years in a row, just like a lot of our governmental entities are still trying to recover from the recession and from the downturn in our economy. It would take several years, of an increase in his compensation in order to make up for what he's already been penalized for. And I think it's fair to give credit where credit is due. And in my opinion, Mr. Miller has come a very long way from the days of where we were in Greenlight. I see, Mr. Johnson, you spoke on this issue already, or no? You have something additional to add?
I have something additional, if I may.
Please go forward.
I see that we have really just one comparison to another agency, which is with Hart, what Ms. Egan was at previous to her departure, and then what the interim CEO is at the present time. Did the committee consider other agencies throughout Florida?
We did have some more information, yeah.
Do you want to speak to that, Mr. Barkley?
I don't have any other additional information on that. Oops, am I on? Yeah. I don't have any additional information with regard to other than what was presented to the Personnel Committee.
All right, we have a motion and...
May I continue?
Okay, go ahead.
I share the committee's view that there has been significant improvement over the last year. The performance measurement is just a model, I think, for the industry. Mr. Miller has been very active nationally and locally in the American Transit Association and the Florida Transit Association. He has brought benchmarking information to us, and we have been using that far better than I think many of the other agencies that I've been involved in. And so I'm very, very positive on that. I'm really struggling, on the other hand, with where we are ridership and responding in this kind of troubling area that's not of Mr. Miller's making, but we're moving through that in some with some concern. I don't understand the committee's recommendation to give more this time because we won't have money if the homestead exemption passes, because that increase is going to be in there and we'll be living with it for the future. So just, I'm having a lot of trouble going with a total 4% increase this year. I would love to do something a little less, or possibly a 3% increase and a lump sum. So, thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. All right, we have a motion and a second on the floor. Are there any more questions, concerns, or comments?
Madam Chair.
Yes, Commissioner Justice.
Thank you. Is it possible to get an answer to Mr. Schulman's question before we go? Just to know what that percentage was? I know it was a 2.5% in 2016, but what was last year's?
It's 4.
4?
4.
Okay.
Are you good, Commissioner?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. So now we have a motion and a second on the floor. Please open the voting card, Rachel. All right, and that motion passes. Thank you very much for the very healthy discussion. And now we are on the committee appointments. Commissioner Barkley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The nominating committee, which is one committee that I chair, met on January 31st and recommends the following. For the Open Finance Committee position, it is recommended that alternate Richard Bennett be made a full member of this committee. He's done a good job. He's attended consistently, and we would look forward to having him be a full member of the committee. And for the time being, the committee recommends keeping the committee's alternate position open until a new Clearwater representative is appointed to see if that person might be interested in filling the alternate position there.
May I make a motion to approve?
We've got more.
There's more.
I know, but I don't want to do them all lump. Let's do one at a time. I think that's the appropriate way to do it. I'd just like to make a motion to approve that recommendation.
Which one? The
first one.
Finance Committee recommendation?
Second.
Please open the voting card, Rachel. Yes, sir. Are there any Finance Committee appointments? All right. And that motion passes. Thank you, Commissioner Eggers.
Okay. It is recommended current alternate Josh Schulman be named as full-time member for the committee. And we would appoint Commissioner Samantha Fenger, who has identified an interest in the committee, as the new alternate for that committee.
Move approval.
Second.
Please open the vote. Recommendation. All right. All those, please, oh, there you go.
Mine didn't open
Somebody's
up.
not.
I'm a yes, I didn't open, mine didn't open up.
Okay, we have one more.
It's Brian. Brian's got it.
Sorry.
There we go.
I thought I pushed it.
Thank you. All right, that motion passes.
Representative to the Forward Pinellas Board, the nominating committee recommends that Janet Long be appointed to that position representing PSTA on the Forward Pinellas Board. As chair of the nominating committee, I make a motion to approve this recommendation.
All right, do we have a second?
Second.
Have a
Commissioner Eggers has a question. Hold on, let me get your mic going here.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I was thinking about this as we try to get, more and more voices on our different boards, and your position, just a question to you really about the position on TVRPC and TBARTA. Doesn't that give you a seat at the TMA meeting, TMA group? That's kind of the nexus with MPO, I think. So from my perspective, I would love to have, and I think you do a great job, that's not the issue here. I'd just love to have somebody like Brian Scott, who brings a different perspective completely than any of us on this board could possibly bring to a planning process. And I would just like to see a little more diversity of thought on these boards that we have an option to do. So it's just a comment, but I don't know that what I said is accurate. That's why I was asking you about the TBARTA and the TVRPC input to the TMA being that kind of nexus with MPO. So.
Do you want me to answer
Yes,
you now?
please. That'd be
Okay.
great. Thanks.
Yes, I am a member of the TMA, and it's probably important to state that given that I were fortunate enough to be voted on today on this issue, I am there as a representative of PSTA, not as my role on other boards. And it was felt during the meeting that it was very critical at this point in time to have an elected official representing this agency on that board, because this next year and the one following are going to be so critical to moving our TBARTA and our TMA issues forward. And while I have incredible respect for Mr. Scott and his thought process and input on this board, he is not an elected official and would not have the same level of involvement on the other two boards that are so critical to the process going forward. So,
Thank you.
and
Thank you.
did that answer your question? Okay. Counselor Johnson?
Do I have to hit this again?
No, you're good.
I'm good?
You're good.
Okay. My question follows along the same lines. However, how many boards, how many committees are you on for PSTA? You're the chairman of how many we have how many committees, Rachel?
6 or 7, 3, 4, 5, 6.
5. And so, let me see, Pat Gerard from the county is on 1, and you're on 4. You're the chairman of 4, I think, 3 or 4. This will make you 4. So that means that the county representatives chair the majority of everything in PSTA. And I'm not saying this wrong. And I think you're great and wonderful, and you do all these great and wonderful things. But I do think that there are 15 people here, and all but 4 of them serve cities. And that was the intent of the makeup of this board of 15 people, is so that there would be a different perspective than the same one. So I just, I'm very proud of what you've done and what you're doing and what you're working towards, and I support you in all of that, but I just think that the wealth needs to be spread around.
Counselor, if I may, I hear you clearly. I do not take it personally. I value your input on this board. You know that. I would like to remind you, though, that there are 24 cities in this county. And as a county-wide elected official, I represent every single one of them, as does Commissioner Justice and Commissioner Gerard. And I am not sitting there as a county commissioner. I'm sitting there as a member of PSTA. And I was elected by this board to the positions that you're talking about. So I'm just going to leave it at that. And are there any other questions, comments, or concerns that anybody would like to raise? Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. this gives me a chance, because I'm leaving, to just comment a little bit about the committee structure and the appointments. I know in the past, like 5, 6 years ago, many of the positions were filled by just a handful of people. And we created a process where we would try to get as many people involved in positions and to move them up through the development. And this isn't so much the Forward Pinellas position, but to share the chairmanship and the vice chairmanship so that people are developing. I think right now we're sort of, we've got a lot of concentration at that point. When I became chair, I chose to drop off of the chairmanship of a policy committee, but just stay with the executive and I think the personnel committee. So I would hope that there would be some consideration for that. In looking at the Forward Pinellas board, what I have found to be my biggest challenge is really to make sure that I'm articulating the vision, the collective vision of this board, instead of where I might come from just by myself. And so I think it's very important that we spend some time talking about those policy decisions moving forward. And I don't know quite how that fits in with, I know we've had some discussion about our fine chairman trying to talk to us about some of the positions that are going to be advanced at T-BARTA. But I think that's important going forward. I don't know if you want to comment in that regard as to how we develop policy statements that move forward.
I do, because I think you raise a very, very important point. When I first came on this board, it is no surprise, I'm sure, to any of you, because you've heard me say it before, I was literally swimming upstream because I found it so difficult to get up to speed, given the complexities of the board, given the number of folks that are on the board, and given how many technical presentations we get from our staff. And so you may remember, Mr. Johnson, because you were chair when I attended my very first executive committee meeting, and I was stunned because at the time there were only 3 people on that executive committee. How many are there now, Brad?
Now we have 5.
And now we have 5, and that's because I clearly recognized we needed an attrition system so that as people got really knowledgeable and really savvy about this board and about the issues, we would be nurturing and bringing up people onto the executive committee. And to Commissioner Patty Johnson, I want to say, be careful what you ask for. You are now on the executive committee, are you not?
As an alternate.
Okay, but you're learning. You're in a learning phase, and pretty soon you'll be sitting where I'm sitting, and you'll be sitting on all those committees. So good luck. All right, I think we have a motion and a second.
May I answer that?
I'm sorry?
May I answer that,
course,
please?
of course.
Thank you so much.
Oh, my goodness, now we have a queue.
Let me see. You are the chairman of the legislative committee, the executive committee, the personnel committee, you're on the nominating committee, and T-BARTA.
Do you want the rest of them?
The rest of what?
The committees that I serve on?
For PSTA?
Oh, no, not for PSTA.
Okay, that's all I'm talking about is PSTA. That's all we're here to discuss. And when we're sharing or making people do separate or different things, and just because I'm on the executive committee doesn't mean I ever want to be chair. But I think that maybe you might think about opening it up to other people. It was not a slam dunk. Joe, what was the vote? And who all asked to be on that committee?
Yeah, we had We had 5 people that offered to serve as this position, on this position.
5 on the committee. So, that was it.
All right, thank you. And, excuse me, I apologize, Counselor Tornga. It's my glasses, they're trifocals. I was trying to figure out where, go ahead.
Thank you very much. I pushed my button to make a comment based on Council Member Johnson. And as he progressed, he brought up some really great points. And I appreciate everything that everybody is saying here. It is a representative on the board for Forward Pinellas, and that's what we're talking about, correct? And as he said, it's the person that really represents what PSTA is, and so any comments that are made up there. So whoever has a really steeped, really great background on PSTA, I think it's important as we sit there. I sit on that board, and I appreciate that, and I've appreciated Mr. Johnson here, what he has done in relationship to that. He's always very quick to point out that everyone knows who he is up there, but he is there for PSTA and representing PSTA. So can others represent PSTA? Surely. But I think you certainly can with your background on all of the committees here. I haven't sat on all of the committees here. Do I think I could represent PSTA? Absolutely sure. I think anybody, all of us could. I think a selection was made, and I appreciate all the comments made by everyone. I'm in support of the selection.
Okay, Commissioner Banter has the floor.
Yes, thank you. I was in the audience for this meeting because I had I think our personnel committee meeting before that, and then I had my one-on-one with Brad afterwards, and as you know, I drive a long way to get here, so I waited around.
And we're grateful.
Thank you. I'm happy to do it. And, you know, to Commissioner Long, I mean, you know, I think she made a good point that, you know, she represents all of Pinellas County. And up in Tarpon Springs, we're very astute at seeing what county commissioners make it to the north part of the county and those that don't. And I can say, even though Commissioner Long and I don't agree on every issue in the county, she does make herself known in Tarpon Springs. And especially with the Anklo Dredge project, she, you know, is very attentive to that, as well as Mr. Eggers, who's our rep, and Mr. Justice as well. So I want to thank you for that. So I do echo your comments when you say that you represent the 24 cities or municipalities, if you will, in Pinellas County. I'm new on this board and very much in a learning process. I'm in no way qualified to be on Fort Pinellas, nor do I want to be. You know, but I have been elected to office for 5 years, and I can see and understand things. And I take no issue with you being on that board, and I support that committee's nomination. Just perhaps in a future meeting when we have some discussion items, maybe we can better talk about, you know, do we limit the number of boards people are on? Is there some system we can have in place to spread that out more, just to prevent what I feel on this board right now is a conversation of one person wanting to be on it, and you know, and someone not happy about that because they want to be on it, which is fine. Most of us, besides 2 here, ran for office, so we're used to that. But maybe put some kind of structure in place so we don't get into these types of conversations. Thank you.
Commissioner Eggers, did you have a comment? Can I just say one thing before you speak? I want to thank you for what you just said, Councilor Banther, because we are in a fabulous place right now. When I first joined PSTA, we had to beg people to sit on these committees. Do you remember that, Bill? You couldn't get people to sit on them and or participate. And if they did, they never said a word. And now we have the exact opposite. So I think we'll all be very cognizant of that in the future. Commissioner Eggers.
Yeah, I guess more than anything, just a point of order here. I just want to make sure that.
Press your mic, please.
Oh, thank you. I just want to make sure that I understand. I mean, do we make dual nominations? Are we taking each nomination? I'd like to make a positive vote today, so I'd like to nominate Brian Scott as well. But I just want to I didn't want to make sure that I was doing the right order here, that we weren't taking one at a time, so, but I'd rather have, I'd rather nominate Brian Scott as somebody for consideration.
Even though he's not elected?
I think all members on this board are equal in value, and many of them have more experience than others, and I think Brian has significant experience and enough to be on that board, yes.
Okay,
We have a-
Counselor?
We have a motion on the floor, so it wasn't open to nominations. The way the process has been is to make a motion, and we can't have competing motions on the floor. So there's a motion that proposed chairperson, almost a chairman, sorry, Chairperson Long to be the appointment to the Ford Pinellas. So the board needs to vote one way or another on that motion or amend the motion.
I was just going to say, let's vote on that, and then if it does not pass, we can vote on Commissioner Egger's motion. I mean, is that right?
Yes, then Commissioner Eggers could make a motion.
There you
and
go.
if it was seconded, the board would vote on that motion.
All right. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Commissioner Eggers, are you wanting to speak? You don't like this? Okay, there you go. We have a motion and a second. Rachel, could you please open the board? Wait, what am I, just a minute. We have 2 people who haven't voted?
No, we got everybody.
We're good.
13.
Oh, okay. Oh, we do. Sorry. Well, the motion passed. And now if we could move on, please. You well. Thank you. And now we are on 6D, our final action item related to the Regional Transit Feasibility Plan. I understand we'll have the opportunity to vote on 2 items after we hear the presentation. So Brad, would you like to explain exactly what we're going to be working on?
Yes. So before Mr. Rick Homans and Scott Pringle come forward to give their presentations, keep in mind that this is put on your agenda as an action item. Actually, 2 different action items. If you look in the summary, there's an A and a B, and you can take it one individual votes or together. Action item A is for the PSTA board to pass a resolution of support for the proposed catalyst project that Scott is going to be presenting. The city of St. Petersburg voted unanimously in support of this, and I don't think they voted yet, but I think Forward Pinellas has considered a similar kind of resolution for this. And I think that would be something that would show some leadership by the PSTA board to advance this regional whole process. And then item B on the action items is a separate document, an MOU with T-BARTA. T-BARTA board voted to send and to develop an MOU between all 3 transit systems and the 3 MPOs that basically lays out a process where T-BARTA will take the lead on the next phase of moving this project forward. As you know, the Florida DOT has identified $5 million of funding for the next phase of design of this express system between Pinellas and Pasco County. And the MOU, as it's been framed, essentially just commits T-BARTA to working with the transit agencies and the MPOs, but shows that T-BARTA will take the lead in that next phase. It really is a sort of passing of the baton from HART to T-BARTA that's reflected in that vote. So with that, that's what you're voting on. Think of that as Scott and Mr. Homans give their presentations.
Mr. Holman, would you please come up and introduce yourself and give your address? Mr. Holman is the president and CEO of the Tampa Bay Partnership, who's going to say a few words about why this transit plan is so needed in our region, what it means to our business community, and then if he gets stuck on an issue, he can call on Mr. Scott Pringle, who will give us a brief presentation on all the technical components. Welcome.
Great, thank you.
Nice to see you this morning.
Chair Long, Brad, rest of the board, great to be with you and spend a few minutes in talking about kind of at a higher level, as I think Councilman Johnson was talking about earlier, why this is so needed. I also wanted to, if I could, on the MOU with T-BARTA, I think as Councilman Johnson said earlier, that is going through, and Ray can clarify this, but some feedback from the various signatories, the Hart, yourselves, the MPOs in Pasco, Hillsborough, and Pinellas, to make sure everybody's voice has been heard. A document can be finalized and probably brought back for a final decision within the next 60 days. So getting input at this point is absolutely critical so that everybody approves the same MOU at the right time and you don't have to do it over and over again, different versions of it. But with that said, I also want to commend PSTA on the work that you've been doing. You've been a leader in the region in terms of your innovative approaches to transit, certainly looking at the next generation, rideshare, autonomous, et cetera. I've been proud to be a part of the delegation representing the regional business leadership to support the Central Avenue BRT, which, as you know, is the first premium transit project to go for a federal capital grant. And we'll be joining Brad and other members of the delegation March 18th, 19th, and 20th in Washington to meet with congressional leaders and administration officials to move this forward. So commend you on that. What I wanted to do this morning was talk briefly about why this discussion is so important. And then number two is why there's a great sense of urgency about the work that we're undertaking right now. And I just start out by framing amongst business leadership and I think the general population, transportation is certainly one of the greatest economic challenges facing our community in terms of our competitiveness with our peer and aspirational cities across the country, and our ability to attract and retain jobs and investment for our population here. We put on here we're the 18th largest metropolitan area in the United States. We are last in the supply of transit, and we are the last in ridership amongst the top 20 metros. At the same time, we're expecting as a region 620,000 new residents by 2025. That is a huge amount of growth. And the recent report we did on our indicators and competitiveness shows actually that our congestion right now is not too bad when compared to other markets, even though we love to complain about it. Those of us who travel, we go into other markets and we realize, boy, other places have it as bad or worse than we do. But then when you add 620,000 new people to that, we are headed towards a serious bottleneck that we've got to deal with. A couple more points that I want to raise here is we have done some research in terms of where we stand as a metropolitan area. Between 1970 and 2012, the growth rate of suburban poverty in Tampa Bay, out of the top 100 metropolitan areas in the country, we were number 2. I think as we looked at that and tried to answer why did that happen, after the recession, you had all sorts of people of very little means moving to places where housing was available for basically nothing. And what they're finding now is they're basically isolated from a transit standpoint. And so the availability of jobs from where these low, moderate income individuals live is a much smaller number of jobs they can access. In fact, from Brookings and the Eno Center for Transportation, only 16% of our population in Tampa Bay can reach a job within 90 minutes using public transit. And last year, I think the Tampa Bay Times put this in a very human, form, where they recounted a worker coming from the new Tampa area going to, I think, a $10 to $12 an hour job near Tampa International Airport and taking about 3 hours to get there one way. And this woman, who was an earner for her family, is not alone. This is why we're talking about this, is connecting people to jobs and opening up opportunities. If you have a family in West Pasco, the idea of getting to a job in downtown St. Pete is next to impossible if they don't have a car and are willing to put the investment into that. So that's the big picture about what we're talking about here. The urgency I want to address, and on this slide you see 3 pictures. And on the left, and I'll go into these in a little bit of detail, is political leadership. In the center is infrastructure investment, and on the right is transit planning. And these are 3 parallel tracks that we are on today that are converging in a very serendipitous way that create a massive opportunity and a generational opportunity for Tampa Bay. First, on political leadership. And this is this chart here. You'll only understand its significance if one steps back from our traditional kind of county-based view of things and looks at the Tampa Bay region. But the way political leadership, as you all know, is selected and in Tallahassee is it's done well in advance, usually with freshman classes coming in, looking at who will be their Senate president, who will be their Speaker of their House during their final 2 years. And so what we have over a 6-year period, the 2 years just completed, we've had the Speaker of the House from Pasco County, Richard Corcoran. The next 2 years, so the next session and the session after that, Senator Bill Galvano will be President of the Senate, representing Manatee County and Hillsborough County. And then the 2 years after that, we have the speakership and the presidency in Senator Wilton Simpson from Pasco, Hernando, Citrus counties, and Chris Sproul's representative from Pinellas County. And so you look at this track of leadership and the succession and the opportunity for them to actually deliver something significant, transformative, regional of value to Tampa Bay, and it's staring us right in the face. And we need to take advantage of this opportunity. If we miss this, it won't come around again for quite some time, the way it's facing us. And I'll just detour a second here, too, and I'll maybe talk about this a little more later, but I've spent last week in Tallahassee meeting with most of these people and others, been to Washington, met with the officials at the FTA, and what we have heard resoundingly and clearly from these individuals, whether you like it or not, is we've heard that they're not that receptive to projects that involve huge investments in rail infrastructure right now. And there may be another administration coming in 4 years or 8 years that, and all that changes, and there's a whole different thing that they're looking at. But in the cycle that we're in right now, the political leadership that's in place that would be in charge of approving big projects moving forward looks a lot more kindly upon bus rapid transit, autonomous, opening up options for the future that recognize where we're headed, and not going with a kind of an all-or-nothing rail project that's the direction that one is committed to. So I think we've all heard that. I've heard it very directly from these folks, and I think it's important as one looks at this slide. So that's political leadership, big opportunity. During this same time frame, we've had Tampa Bay Next in the works. And the interesting thing about Tampa Bay Next is while we've got the leadership in place, you have the governor and Florida Department of Transportation talking about making a multi-billion-dollar investment in Tampa Bay transportation infrastructure. And because of the issues that we're facing, the TB Next process in the last couple of years, they came out very aggressively and said, we want to include transit in this discussion. But we all know Tampa Bay Next is the underlying premise there is to connect Tampa Bay as one region, one market. and looking at getting rid of the bottlenecks with the interchanges on the Hillsborough side at the airport and downtown that bottleneck the flow of traffic in our region. Rebuilding the Howard Franklin Bridge so that it can survive another 30, 40 years, but also building it out so it handles increased capacity and also has provisions for transit, whatever way we like to go. And also the idea of managed lanes, that we need to create some dedicated guideways, not dedicated guideways, but some pathways in our transportation infrastructure that can get people from point A to B in the quickest possible way, and also provide a bed for transit options in the future. But the big thing here is, at the same time we've got the political leadership, you've got the state administration saying we're prepared to invest billions of dollars in Tampa Bay. The third track that's been moving forward is the Regional Transit Feasibility Plan. And the timing of this to go right alongside TB Next is I think, at first there was a little bit of luck attached to it, but it's now turning into that all the players are working to the best of their ability to integrate these as much as possible if that's the direction that we want to go. They want to point out that here's an opportunity and we can build transit into it. I've been very impressed by the process that FDOT, Hart, and Jacobs have been through. The purpose of this was to develop the most competitive project for federal funding using their criteria, which so happens to be the exact same criteria that the state uses to determine where its funding goes. So critical to use the databases and the point structure and the rating structure that the FTA and FDOT use in order to put forward the most competitive project. Now we have that in front of us. It is truly regional. It's connecting Pasco, Hillsborough, Pinellas. It has included in it the idea of intermodal stations in Wesley Chapel, USF, downtown West Shore Gateway, and downtown St. Pete. And it provides a lot of integration with the Tampa Bay Next project. I think from the business community, what we are advocating for and support is the idea that this is the highest possible standards that this BRT project represents, that there's the Institute for Transportation and Development Policy, the ITDP, has the BRT rating system, bronze, silver, gold. There is not a gold BRT system in operation in the U.S. It's our feeling that we have the opportunity to meet that standard and to be a leader and to have other communities coming here and asking, how did you do this? The key components of this are the dedicated lanes, the enhanced stations, the intersection priority where when it meets a red light, it just goes right on, it turns green and goes on through. High quality vehicles, off-board fare collection, platform level boarding. There's a lot here to unpack and get into and understand. But the fact is, if you go to the airport and you take the new SkyConnect train, in quotes, to the rent-a-car facility or to the economy parking, that is a bus. That is a rubber-tired vehicle, and it shows the high side of what this technology can accomplish. That's exciting, and I think that we need to embrace the opportunity. We need to be aspirational about where we're headed with this. The final two slides, just to underscore, again, why this is so important. We are one market, we're one region. People do not live, work, and play in one county where we all move about, you know, as we should when we live in the 18th largest metro area. So what you see here is from the dark to the medium dark to the light for each county. The part that's in the middle, those are the people who live and work in the same county. But on either side of that, like for Pinellas County, you see 270,000 people. To the left, 158 work here but live elsewhere. 137 on the right live here but work elsewhere. There's more people that live and work in different places than do live and work in Pinellas County. And you find similar stories in Hillsborough and to a much larger degree in Pasco County. This is why regional transit is so critical. Finally, going back to the political leadership, to the opportunity, it's our feeling very strongly that Central Florida has had its turn at the premium transit table for FDOT funding, for state funding and federal funding. South Florida, the same thing. And what you see on this slide here is the orange in the middle is the level of state funding that's gone into South Florida and to Central Florida. And most of this is not according to the traditional kind of matches. So, for example, in the Sunrail project in Central Florida, you'll see here the local governments put in $153 million, and they were able to do that by borrowing the money from the state and then paying it back over an extended period of time. The state wrote a check for all the right-of-way for the Sunrail, $442 million, and then they agreed to underwrite the operating costs for 7 years to the tune of about $190 million. So you look at the commitment that's been made, and then South Florida, you'll see a similar kind of a thing, and these numbers are highly understated because some of the numbers are not available. But the fact is that when you look at Tampa Bay, we're at zero. And this is our chance to move forward with a major premium transit project that would be the first step, not the only step, but the first step in building out a regional transit system. And we applaud your leadership in terms of moving this forward and your participation with it. And I hope that that sets the stage for Scott and his presentation on the plan itself. And we'd be happy to take any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Homan, very much for your time and your efforts to come present to us this morning. Any questions, thoughts, or comments that anybody would like to make at this point?
One quick question.
Commissioner,
yeah.
turn on your mic.
Thank you for the presentation. It was great. You said we are at zero, and I lost the context of that conversation, so that comment.
Commissioner Eggers, that's for investment in premium transit from the state level in Tampa Bay.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else? Question?
Thank you very much.
At the moment, that's it, but let's let Scott speak.
Don't go away.
What?
You want me to hang around?
Yeah,
Okay.
don't go away. You never know what's going to come across someone's mind. Did you have something else, Commissioner Eggers?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair. Scott Pringle with Jacobs Engineering. I'm the project manager from the consultant side for the Regional Transit Feasibility Plan. Mr. Homans did a great job of sort of introducing what we're talking about here this morning. What I'll do is provide a very brief summary and show you how we got from point A to point B as where we are today, sort of give you some of that background and context. For those who have not seen this presentation, please reach out to me. I can certainly schedule a time to provide you some more details as this morning's presentation is pretty brief. So the plan itself is a 2-year effort. The first year was designed to look at the data using that technical process that Rick mentioned, which is established by those competitive grant programs, which is the federal grant program, the state grant program, come up with some feasible draft concepts in year 1. We've done that, and that's where we are at this point in the process. Starting here, moving forward through the rest of the year into October, is set aside solely for taking that draft concept and vetting it with the community. So we're just kicking that off now, and you're going to start hearing a lot more about that when we can actually get out to the public. We've had public input all the way through, but we're really going to just only focus on getting public input through the next couple of months. So with that, the plan purpose was twofold. We wanted to validate that premium regional transit vision for Tampa Bay, and Rick talked a little bit about that. But more importantly, and a big part of that was understanding where the vision is, but then how do you actually get started on moving the ball forward to build that ultimate vision? So what can we do today to start gaining momentum and incrementally building our way towards this future vision? And that's what we're calling that Catalyst project, which again is the project that we're identifying here in 2018 as being feasible to move forward for those federal and state grant dollars. This is the vision that we talked about and Mr. Homans presented. There are 21 different regional premium transit projects in this vision, and what we're saying is that we need all of these. You know, historically, Tampa Bay has done a really poor job in investing in premium transit, and so we have a lot of needs out there, but the idea is once we establish this first milestone, identifying that vision, how do we get started? So our second milestone was to start putting modes to these different projects, looking at a wide variety of modes. We looked at light rail, commuter rail, bus rapid transit, other rubber tire opportunities as well, including ferries. And where we came down to fall of last year is essentially focusing on these 5 alternatives. These were proving to be the 2 corridors that had the most potential to compete for those federal and state grant dollars. That's the I-275 corridor connecting Wesley Chapel all the way to St. Petersburg, as well as the CSX corridor, which is connecting the USF area to downtown Tampa. We looked at a variety of modes on those corridors, specifically rail and rubber tire and I-275, and 2 different types of rail, a commuter or an urban, more frequent service on the CSX corridor, as well as rubber tire. Those evaluation criteria that I mentioned before, the federal program, that state grant program, they are listed here on your screen. Just a quick summary of some of the things we're looking at, which is employment density and ridership, and a big part of that was costs. So we were working our way through the first year, focusing on population and employment density, trying to understand what the ridership was, and a big focus of this fall was then developing those costs and seeing how cost effective we were. So now looking at those 5 alternatives, which in the interstate actually meant expanding the interstate, putting something in the median, what we're finding is that we're coming back with very high project costs. And on the interstate, it makes sense. If you're putting something in the median and having to expand, you're needing additional right-of-way, new bridge structures, new overpasses, and a lot of other infrastructure, which just kept on rising the overall project cost to a tune of somewhere between $2 and $5 billion, depending upon those 2 modes. Same conversation on the CSX corridor. We looked at double tracking that active freight rail corridor. There's only 1 single track out there today. You can see the cost there ranging from about $340 million to $1 billion. FTA would really like to see a project that is at least $10 per trip annually or better. That's their metric for cost effectiveness. On these 5 alternatives, you can see how close we came, and for the vast majority of these alternatives, we were pretty far away from that metric. And it's at that point in about the November timeframe where we recognized we needed to take a step back and begin value engineering those 5 concepts to really make them as competitive as we possibly could, getting them in a better opportunity to compete for those federal and state grant dollars. So we came up with 2 concepts coming out of that value engineering process. And the simplest way to sort of communicate the value engineering process is we looked at what's out there today. So what are our existing assets in each one of those corridors? How can we maximize those assets to the advantage of transit? Now in the interstate, no surprise, the existing asset is the interstate. So the question is, how can we use that space and integrate transit into it? And along the CSX corridor was a single track active freight rail corridor. So again, how can we maximize that existing asset to the benefit of transit? So along the I-275 corridor, what we have identified is the opportunity to widen the shoulders and carve out a portion of the shoulder and dedicate it to transit. And by doing that, we don't have any additional right-of-way requirements for putting it in the median, expanding the interstate itself, and we can piggyback on the existing infrastructure that's out there today, looking at the bridge, looking at the bridge replacement plans, using them, again, to significantly reduce the project cost, really leverage what we have out there today to the advantage of transit. Now, we wouldn't have to look for any additional right-of-way to do this. We could use what's already out there today, except for at the station areas. We do have over 21 different stations planned along the entire length of this 41-mile corridor. 19 of them are to be at street level, so they have good connectivity to the neighborhoods and the communities they serve. And what we're able to do is dramatically reduce those project costs from the $2.9 billion down to a total project cost of between $1.3 and $6 billion. But by leveraging the partnership, leveraging those roadway dollars, partnering with FDOT and what they're planning to do in modernizing the interstate, we're actually be able to realize an even greater savings on the transit project side, bringing us down to about a $450 million rubber tire project along the interstate. Now, we took the exact same approach to the CSX corridor. What can we do with the active freight rail corridor? Well, there is a rail technology out there today that has been approved by the Federal Rail Administration to operate on existing freight rail lines. That's called an electric or a diesel multiple unit rail car. So we can take that single track, refurbish it, add some additional what we call sidings to make sure we get some frequency. Again, able to value engineer that project, bringing it down from about $1 billion to about $620 million for that total project. And in the end, this is where we are today, is that by doing this value engineering process, we feel very strongly, and we've been saying this since January, that there are merit to both of those projects. But there are differences as well. So the difference is when you start looking at how you move forward with what your partnerships are. You know, when we're looking at the right-of-way needed, we have a partner that's already there at the table in the way of the Federal Department of Transportation and getting that right-of-way. The CSX corridor would require additional conversations with CSX to either buy or lease that corridor. And the time to construct those two projects are very different. We're looking at approximately 5 years to construct the rubber tire on the interstate as compared to 10 years for the CSX corridor. Again, both projects have merit, but looking at something that's feasible today, the focus has been on that rubber tire solution. It does connect 3 counties. You can see the per mile costs at $9 to $11 million as compared to the $54 to $68 million on the CSX corridor. The annual operations cost, big difference there too. $7 million for that 41-mile corridor versus $12 million for that 9-mile corridor along the CSX. And just like Mr. Homans mentioned, when we're looking at developing this rubber, and I keep on using the word rubber tire because honestly I don't think bus rapid transit is an accurate description of what we're talking about here. You know, we're really looking forward to the use of these new technologies that are coming online. So you're looking at vehicles that operate like a train, they feel like a train, they have the conveniences of a train, they have the passenger amenities at stations, major stations associated with them. They have the dedicated space to bypass congestion. Again, looking to sort of achieve that gold standard that Mr. Homans presented. And we also have the opportunity by partnering with the department to move some of those dollars and really heavily invest in station areas to make sure that we have good connections to the communities. That $450 million cost, just over 40% of that would actually be going into stations. So really robust investment in the community and in those stations. And then when you look at the technology, you know, driverless vehicles or autonomous transit vehicles are definitely the way we feel the transportation industry is moving. When we start planning this project out and you look out 8 to 10 years where you may be replacing vehicles anyways, because that's the traditional lifespan, 10 to 12 years for a rubber tire vehicle, we may have the opportunity to go ahead and swap out those vehicles and start implementing these new transit technologies. And by partnering with the department, we can make sure that we've got the communications infrastructure built today so that we can adapt to those technologies as they come online. But it's really absolutely critical to make sure we have connections to everything that's happening with each one of the different areas within the region. For example, when we're looking at connecting and circulating in downtown St. Petersburg, we're actually looking at direct interface with the Central Avenue BRT and possibly using the same space. And in conclusion, Madam Chair, just a quick slide about our schedule. Again, we're going to take this concept out through the rest of spring and summer to get comments on these drafts from the public, take all the input that we're hearing in that summer, fall time frame, go back out to the public and talk about how the plan's been modified based on the input we received, and that will essentially put us in a point of finalizing the recommendation of fall of this year. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Anyone? Commissioner Eggers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, it's nice to hear that presentation again. You always pick up a little bit each time, so you probably, I know, can't probably hear enough it. So thank you for that. The only thing that really concerns me at all about this is when I go to that last slide that you showed, and that's the schedule. When the first time I heard this, we talked about going out to the public. It was in January, or maybe even before that, I can't remember. And it says spring and summer, and then to bring back in summer and fall. And I really don't know that we're going to be getting enough public input in that time frame. I think we're starting to compress that time frame, and I really think that is probably, to me, one of the most important things going forward, and that is that we get to the best that we can, get our residents on board with this whole idea. You talked about the regional plan and all the benefits of the one that we've chosen. It's so critical that we get them on board with it, and that we get some buzz going out there in the public about something that will be good for our kids and our grandkids and their kids. And so I'm a little concerned that we're not going to have enough time, and that we're going to short circuit it again, and that we're not going to get the public on board, and that we're going to be all out there, all of us doing our thing, and then you kind of look around and say, wait, where is everybody? So I love what we're doing. I think this is great. I think this is the right direction, but I really think we need to, I'm not sure what. I'm not the professional, but anyway, I'm concerned about that. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Commissioner. It's coming extremely soon. And to be honest with you, we've gotten a lot of public comment already. So we've had opportunities to do a lot of small group meetings as sort of a soft launch as we begin this. So we're already out there talking to folks. We're going to do a lot more very soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Eggers. Thank you, Scott. Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I've said a couple things in committee meeting, but let me sort of cover them briefly here. I believe that Hart and the project team once again missed the most important step in the process, that of developing a community understanding of the transportation future needs of the region. I think this is what happened at Greenlight Pinellas, and I think it happened at TBX. It was rectified in the TB Next process. There were large meetings with large number of people talking about the need for the future. And so accordingly, I anticipate the focus of the public will be on the flaws of one or the other solution rather than on what we're proposing to try to do and then pick a solution within that larger scope. And so I think we're missing the power of the regional lens at looking at this project. And as far as the regional lens, Mr. Homan's project talked about adding 620,000 people by 2025. I know that in 2014, Pinellas was projected to grow 60,000 people by 2040. Yet in the first 3 years, the 3 years that are behind us, we already grew 30,000 people. So we, and I've heard some people say that the Tampa Bay region will have as many people as Dallas-Fort Worth does today by maybe 2050, which is going to be a huge challenge. It's going to change the way of life in this community unless we start thinking about doing something differently. But I haven't heard that part of the discussion, and I think it's getting, the solution is getting ahead of that problem. And so short of a wall and making Georgia pay for it, Florida will be adding people. And Tampa Bay is a very desirable place, but congestion will increase. I've been driving around north part of Orlando recently. It's a mess.
No kidding.
And even the northern suburbs of Tampa, our district secretary has been very clear. If there is no plan for local funding this project, he can't proceed with the next phase of this. And that is what our resolution says too. It's all contingent on local funding. And in order to get these the benefits, I think one of the things we have to start talking about is who's going to benefit from these transit-oriented stops, and get them to be able to step up and say, okay, we can make a contribution to this. That would then help the public to say, well, okay, I know that somebody else is coming to participate in this local funding. So I think that if we continue to ignore the compelling situation of the future, we really won't have a chance of moving forward.
Thank you. Understood.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And thank you for your wise comments, Bill. Commissioner Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A great presentation. This is the first time I have seen this, and it's kind of like drinking from a fire hose. It's a lot of information, but I think it's very exciting. I'm really interested to learn more about it, and I agree with the comments made by Commissioner Eggers and Commissioner Johnson. I've just got a quick question on the, I think it was page 19 here, where it has a local annual operations and maintenance of $7 million. Is that anticipated to be a regional number, or is that from each county or each municipality, or?
That's a regional number for the full 41 miles. Okay. So that would be shared across 3 counties.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Scott. Commissioner Barkley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Really appreciate the input from Mr. Homans and Mr. Pringle.
Mr. Barkley, there you go. Okay, you're good.
Say again?
Never mind, your mic went out, but it's
Oh,
back
okay.
on.
We are, the Planning Committee met on February 21st, and we really want to just add to the fact that we hope that the RFP will continue to move forward. The committee recommended approval of the RTFP, which our legal counsel will be reading shortly, that supports the initial recommendations to have the project advance to the public comment phase over the next 6 to 8 months. And further down the line, the committee also recommended approval of the amended MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, naming Tampa Bay Area Regional Transit Authority, or TBARTA, as the implementer of the RTFP recommendations. Planning Committee recommended future operations of the RTFP project be decided at a later date. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. And Mr. Miller, I believe, wants to be recognized.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So very, very good comments by the board members. Just a couple of points. One, to Commissioner Johnson, who has done a really good job of very frequently noting the need to identify or to state the purpose of premium transit to the community. And I think that's exactly why, and I was thinking of you when I invited Mr. Homans to come make his presentation to the group, because that is exactly what Mr. Homans' presentation, I thought, did a very good job of presenting. To Mr. Eggers' point, who he has made also quite frequently about making sure that we do get a robust level of public input and don't shortchange that. Scott does need some help. As you know, as you might have seen in the paper, the HART board voted not to have their staff provide assistance to get the public input, and pretty much left it up to Jacobs to do it by themselves, and because of fear that that would reflect endorsement of the program or something by the staff. It's not my opinion that PSTA should take that position, that we should, at least in Pinellas County, be supportive and help the consultant in setting up public input opportunities. It's not, as we know, it is very challenging to get the public to pay attention to things like this. One of the best ways, as Scott said, we've already gotten a lot. One of the best ways to get public input is to be on the front page of the Tampa Bay Times, which has gotten us a lot of feedback already. as I know probably you know, and many of you have seen this presentation before, there are several folks over in Hillsborough County and elsewhere that have spoken out against this program, largely from the perspective of, well, it doesn't go far enough, or it's not really going to benefit us as much as we think it is, or I'm not exactly sure. So that's why I put this on as an action item for the PSTA board to step up, if you want to, and say, in Pinellas County, we do support moving this to the public. Not necessarily implementing the project, but at least moving it forward into a robust public input process that PSTA staff would participate in Pinellas County. And then hopefully longer, not shorter, as Commissioner Eggers pointed out, toward the end of the year, we'll have even a better project to then put together and move to the next phase. So that's why this is an action item. The city of St. Petersburg did a good job. I thought showed some leadership by endorsing this to move forward again for public input, and that's the action item before you.
Thank you, Brad. Mr. Johnson.
Thank you. Madam Chair, on the wording of the MOU, if I could address that, at the Planning Committee, I had made a suggestion, and the suggestion was partially implemented, but I'm not sure that it wasn't done quite as I intended. On page 2, it's in the top B, C, and D. In D, I had intended that last sentence, implementation of the RTFP does not include actual operation or transit service identified in the RTFP, that and the rest of that sentence that's currently outlined would be replaced by the language in red. The original draft that was, I guess, came from TBARTA said that TBARTA will assume primary responsibility for implementing the whole thing. And the concern that I heard at the executive committee and then at the planning committee is, well, let's get to that point and not worry about who's going to actually run it. I mean, the regional authority may subcontract with PART or PSTA or with somebody else. So rather than say, well, TBARTA is going to run this at this point in time, we just kind of say, TBARTA is going to be the overall umbrella to get us to implementation, and then they'll pick the service provider later. So that was my suggestion in taking out that whole sentence that was there originally and replacing it.
Well, if I may, I believe that we are trying to comply with the language in the statute that clearly designates TBARTA as the agency over all the regional work. So I don't know what, I mean, to me, the entity or the agency has already been identified in state statute.
I'm looking at Sound Transit in the Seattle area, where there is a regional agency, Sound Transit, but they pick and choose who is going to provide which segment of the actual operation. And I'm saying that let's leave that up to that point in time. That's my suggestion.
All right. Thank you for your suggestion. And now, Mr. Barkley.
Yes, I just wanted to point out that on page 2 of the MOU, Mr. Johnson's suggestion from the Planning Committee meeting is in rubrics there.
I see it. Good? Okay. Commissioner Justice.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of things. On the plan summary on our agenda packet, while I agree with having a University of St. Petersburg There is no University of St. Petersburg, even though it's listed in our packet. And probably after this week, there really won't be a USF St. Petersburg. But that notwithstanding, I do agree with designating T-BARTA. I think decades ago when T-BARTA was created, this is exactly what T-BARTA was created for, was to provide regional leadership on transportation. So, and as far as us supporting moving it to the next step, I'm fine with that. I think this is the first time I've heard the presentation. Read a lot about it in the paper, but this is the first time I've actually seen the presentation. But I think it's appropriate that we move forward to getting that public input and deciding after that what our level of involvement and support will be. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Justice. Commissioner Eggers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner Justice, I was going down one road a second ago and listening to your comments. I'm just kind of rethinking it a little bit. But yeah, I'm very much supportive of the first motion that basically agrees to kind of give our support to it. What makes me nervous about the second one only is the information that I've gotten back from you, Madam Chair, and others that had attended that meeting last week and saw the, how did you characterize it?
Spirited and robust.
Yeah, thank you, that. And so as I continue to embrace the idea of regional planning and discussion, but I don't necessarily always see that from all sides, I get a little bit nervous about what turning everything over to T-BAR. I know it's a state statute, but I'm just saying what is that representation on there? And by doing that, I still want that public input, but by doing that, what are we giving up as a decision-making capability? Not necessarily here, but anywhere. What is their charge? I guess I'm looking at it here.
Oh, thank you for the question, because I don't believe that, we do live in a democracy still, and we are still all very involved in the discussion. There's public discussion on all of the agencies and or committees or whatever as it relates to transportation and this issue, which is so important to so many. You are on TMA. You certainly know what I mean by robust and spirited from our last meeting. And as it relates to the technical components, since I know that Mr. Homan spent so much time in Tallahassee last year and this year working on this particular piece of legislation, would you like to speak to the issue of the regional and the
kind of the consistency
the operations piece that some of the members were concerned about in our committee meeting? Thank you.
So the legislation did two primary things in terms of repurposing T-BARTA. Number one, it gave it the authority and responsibility to, quote, plan, implement, and operate regional transit. So it's very clear about that. And then it defined regional transit. Regional transit is a transit service that crosses county lines or is a phase of a project that's intended to cross county lines. So, for example, if this BRT project is laid out and it's going to go 41 miles, but phase one is in Pinellas County and then it moves into Hillsborough, then that would be under the responsibility of T-BARTA to do that. The second thing that it does is it gives T-BARTA the responsibility to produce what's called a regional transit development plan. And that's very different from the very prescribed transit development plan that PSTA and HART does. But the purpose of this regional plan, and it's specifically done in concert and collaboration with the county-based transit agencies, is just to make sure that at a high level, as a regional transit spine, for example, is put into place, that the county-based transit agencies are doing their planning around that, so they're feeding into and feeding off of the spine and off of the stations that are put in place, and maximizing the use as a region and bringing new riders to your county-based system. So it's plan, implement, and operate regional transit being crossing county lines, and it's responsible for producing the regional transit plan in cooperation with you. Any project going forward has to be approved by the county-based MPOs that are in place, or if there's a new regional MPO, by the regional MPO. So there's a lot of, T-BARTA will only succeed by earning the trust and partnership of its partner agencies, which are the MPOs and the transit agencies.
Yeah, follow up real quick.
Yes,
Yeah, thank you.
absolutely.
Yeah, thank you for that. That does make me feel a little better, and I think if I'm told enough times, that probably it'll sink in.
It takes him a while.
Yeah. So, do you know, I mean, if it's going to take a long time, don't worry about it, but do you know quickly, like, the makeup, the representation on T-BARTA? There's what, 15 members?
There's
12
13 members of the board. There are 5 counties in the footprint. So there's Manatee, Hillsborough, Pinellas, Pasco, and Hernando. Each county has a county commissioner who's sitting on the board, so that's 5 seats. The 2 mayors of the largest cities in the operating areas for PSTA and HART are Tampa and St. Pete, so those 2 mayors sit on the board. There are no delegates or substitutions allowed for the mayors. They need to be there themselves. Number 3 is a representative from the HART board and from the PSTA board sit on there, so that's 9. And then there are 4 appointments from the governor of individuals that have to reside in the region. So those are the 13 members.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Homan. And now, are we ready to, did we make a motion on the resolution yet?
No, we didn't make a motion, but the committee did recommend approval on the RTFP resolution. And so we need to...
well, go ahead and make your motion to get us in discussion.
All right,
and then
we'll go ahead and make a motion to approve the RTFP resolution supporting RTFP initial recommendations to have the project advance to the public comment phase over the next 6 to 8 months.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second, and is there any further discussion or comment from the board?
Just clarification, that's
Okay,
for...
hold on, please. Hit your mic.
This is just for
Hit your mic.
There you go.
Okay.
It's for item A on the agenda.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Did you have a question or concern, Mr. Barkley?
No.
Okay. Can you
Oh,
hold on
yeah,
just
sorry.
1 minute
Yeah.
while I ask? Is there any member of the public that wishes to speak at this time? I did have one card, but the gentleman has left. So, anyone? No? Mr. Zimmett?
Just want to read the resolution title. It's Resolution 1801, a resolution of the Pinellas Suncoast Transit Authority supporting the preliminary findings and recommendations related to the implementation of the Catalyst Project in the top-performing corridor in the Tampa Bay Regional Transit Feasibility Plan, supporting PSTA working with the Tampa Bay Area Regional Transit Authority, Forward Pinellas, and partner agencies to incorporate the report's findings in all applicable transit plans, the Long-Range Transportation Plan, and the Florida Department of Transportation's Tampa Bay Next program, in order to implement the recommendations if they have community support and a local funding plan, and providing an effective date.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Zimmett. And just for clarification for everyone, we are on the resolution. Motion and second has been made. All those in favor, Rachel, would you please open the card? Thank you. Excellent. Oh, here. Passed unanimously. And now we are on the, Mr. Barkley?
Okay, the planning committee also recommended approval of an amended MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, naming Tampa Bay Area Regional Transit Authority, T-BARTA, as the implementer of the RTFP recommendations. The planning committee recommended future operations of the RTFP project will be decided at a later date.
Excellent. And may I have a motion?
So moved.
That is the motion. You made a second.
Oh, you made the motion.
Yeah.
Okay, now you, and the second?
I can second that.
Okay. Is there any discussion or comment on the MOU? If not, any member of the public? No. Yes.
Can I just
Absolutely, please approach the bench.
I think it's fantastic that you're going to vote on this, but I would expect that you would get back in the next 60 days an amended version of the MOU that will only improve it and clarify roles and responsibilities, as Whit Blanton is working on doing with Brad and others in the market.
And we look forward to it very much.
Absolutely.
But we are taking first steps today. We are leaders over here. All right, yes, Mr. Zimmett.
If there's going to be additional amendments to this agreement, rather than, if you're going to take action today to approve this, and this isn't going to be the final agreement, then if you want to, one of two things. Either there's no reason to take the action today because you're approving an agreement that's not going to be signed, or number two, the better motion to be made is to authorize the CEO and myself to sign an agreement that might be revised and amended. Otherwise, we're going to have to bring it back to you, so there's no reason to take I would withdraw the motion. If the agreement's going to be changed, there's no reason to take action today. You can take some other action if you want to say you support the MOU, but there's no reason to approve the MOU in this format if that's not going to be the one that's going to be signed.
All right, well, before we decide that, Mr. Zimmett, thank you for bringing that up. Mr. Tornga has a
Madam
question.
Chairperson, I just wanted to comment about, he stood up and said something here that perhaps is along the same line. I just wanted to make sure that what we were agreeing on today is in concert with what he just presented about what T-BARTA is and what their responsibilities are. Because I know on the planning committee, I may have missed a point here about that, and that's called the operating part of it. So is that what part of the issue is?
Well,
right now?
yes, and we know that this is going to be an evolving, changing process, and there'll be many iterations along the way. I do personally think it's important to send a big statement about our support on the efforts that are being made, recognizing clearly that there will be changes as we go along, and as the public has input, we will have additional changes. So this is kind of the first step to show our support and our level of leadership on the issue. To me, I think it's important, but of course, I bend to the wishes of the board. And Brad, you had a comment?
So if I may then, Madam
Yes, of
Madam
course.
Chairperson, there's only one part on here that I think is any issue, and it's not for some period of time. So I think we can go, in my opinion, it seems like we can go forward with this, and this is at a later date. This is,
Right.
the operating of this, so for example, is much, much further down the road.
Of
And
course.
right now, what we're trying to do is just support it. And
Thank
I think that's important for us.
I do
for
too,
PSTA.
thank you. I do too. Commissioner Eggers, you had a...
Yeah, I want.
Please press the mic.
Yep, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome.
You're on. Okay. I agree with your comment. I think we ought to move forward. I certainly don't, because we don't know the nature of those changes, would never want to leave it to the signature, with all due respect, to Brad and to the attorney, sorry. I'd really like to bring it back here, but I do think we know there's going to be some changes. There's a lot of iterations coming. I think it is important to kind of get out in front and just kind of let people know that in the spirit of it, we're kind of moving in that direction. So I would support it as well.
Thank you for your leadership on this issue, Commissioner Eggers. I appreciate it, Commissioner Brad. Mr. Miller. Did you put your mic on?
No, I think that was my recommendation, what Commissioner Eggers suggested, that we move forward with this, knowing that I guess it's a six-party MOU that will may likely have changes, but I think this has really been a good discussion, and we've had a discussion at a number of the committee meetings of PSTA talking about this, operating the future details. But I would recommend that we take a vote today and also bring it back once it's gone through all its other entities as well.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Would you please, Rachel, open the card for us to vote? There you go. This is a big step we're taking today, and I'm very proud of everyone. I just would like to take 2 seconds yes, it passed unanimously. Thank you, Rachel. I would like to take 2 seconds to, did you have a burning desire to say anything, Mr. Chiamonte? Please come forward.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you that I didn't have to say anything before this. Thank you for what you did. This strengthens our hand as we move forward together. So I
Thank you
appreciate
very
it.
much. Thank you, and thank you, everyone. All right, we have a few information items. In the interest of time, I've asked Mr. Miller to please, something's happening to my speech, summarize them for us, because I know that they've been reviewed in committee in great detail. Brad, and go ahead. Thank you.
Yes, I would like to ask two great members of my staff, Mr. Eric Hobner and Trish Collins, to come forward and present a brief, quick presentation of the informational item B. Let me just say just a couple of comments about the other two items that are in your packet. Item A is a health insurance update. As the board may remember, the budget that we just approved, one of the largest increases in costs was for health insurance, and so we implemented for the first time a choice kind of program where we offered the employees different options, including a high deductible plan. And as the Finance Committee reviewed, at least one quarter into it, the first quarter of fiscal year 18, we've seen a substantial reduction in costs of claims, especially by the folks that, about 12% of the employees that chose the high deductible plan. So that's what that, and you can see the presentation in your packet on that. And then the last item of the information is a presentation on our spring break promotion that you have a little card here that describes it in Clearwater, where we are partnering with the City of Clearwater on providing free rides to and from the beach from park and ride lots in downtown Clearwater to our new transit center on the beach. And one weekend into it, it was, all reports are that it was very heavily used. It has been already very heavily used in just its first week of service. But now, to introduce Eric and Trish, they've been doing an amazing job of leading the staff in developing this big piece of paper that is at your places, this performance scorecard system, which is really, I'm very proud of that it is really working to drive the organization toward focused on improving its performance. I won't steal any more. Go, Trish.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Madam Chair and board members. I'm Trish Collins, the Human Resources Manager here at PSTA and the Project Manager for the Performance Scorecard Project. We are very excited to be presenting you the first results for PSTA's Performance Management Scorecard. As you know, we've been actively developing this scorecard and performance management system for a year. We've come to you multiple times on key occasions for your consideration and approval of different components of it. And now here we are. Our employees have been very involved and engaged in the development and the implementation of the scorecard, and a real focus on interdepartmental collaboration and total agency performance throughout our employee and staff population. So we implemented this scorecard on October 1st, and we do now have these first results, and I'm going to let Eric walk you through what you're looking at to understand the document.
Thank you, Trish. It is still good morning. Good morning. Eric Hobner, scorecard analyst on this project, and I'm excited to walk you through the document here and the overall format of Q1 results. So at first glance of this document, you'll see some large bold letters kind of at the bottom, and you'll see the overall performance ratio of 98. So this is what you can see is the Q1 results for fiscal year 18. So Q1 performance ratio, this 98, is an accumulation of 17 organizational metric scores, all of which correlate to one of the 5 key strategic strategies of PSTA, that being community support, financial stability, customer satisfaction, and so on. It's the first column in the document on the left-hand side. And so as you walk from the left-hand side of the document to the right, you'll have the strategy. Each metric is assigned a specific unique identifier, a metric code. You'll have the metric description itself, the performance goals for that specific metric, the total potential points for that metric, and then quarter by quarter, you'll see the results of that metric. At the far right end of the document, you'll see a year-to-date column, and that's just a quick snippet of the 4 quarters, or 3, or whenever you're reviewing the scorecard for that fiscal year. It's a quick snippet of the year-to-date achievement percentage for that metric. So you'll see some colors here on the document. Green, the colors, it's like a traffic light, so green being good, yellow, and then red. Green is the achievement percentage is 90% or higher. Yellow is 75 to 89% achievement of that metric, and then anything highlighted in red will be 74% or less achievement. The last item I want to note to you guys and point out is at the very bottom of the document, you'll see organizational performance metric notes, and each of these notes will correlate to one of the metrics to give you just additional information if you have any questions or need some additional information on that specific metric. So I want to thank you for your time, and I'm going to hand it right back to Trish real quick.
All right. Thank you, Eric. So we will bring you an update each quarter with our newest metrics on our performance. We did present this to the Finance Committee last week. We had a lot of positive comments, some very good questions and discussion that came out of that meeting. Obviously, 98 out of 100 is pretty good. We're very proud of that, and that's obviously a pretty good score. There was some discussion in the Finance Committee about whether that score was too high or too low. But I think what the important takeaway is that this is a powerful tool that is already driving our performance towards these strategic goals and the metrics that we are working on, and that this is another way that we are using the data in our organization to make our strategic decisions. I think that this score is very appropriate, and it reflects that we're already very focused on these goals and achieving the strategy that you as the board have laid out for us. Are there any questions?
Thank you. Commissioner Tornga?
I have gone through the material that was sent to us, and I'm proud that we've carried this through to the point that we have. This was a complicated process when it began, I thought, and you guys have spent a lot of time on this. Did you sense anything when you went through the goals and then the points scored that would cause you, because this is a lot of detailed stuff, and I don't think we want to get in the weeds here, but of course, the question is, did you see anything that would cause us to have any concerns or think about that? For example, if you tell me you start a new program and the score was perfect, and then it continues to be perfect, then of course someone would say, well, what was the goal? Was the goal correct? If you understand the game you're playing in, and you'd say, well, here we have history about that game, and then here's how many touchdowns would normally be scored or whatever have you. This is new for us.
Yes.
So question is, did you sense anything that might have affected the goals, or that the goals should be looked at, or did we do a good job on establishing the goals? The goals were established, wonderfully presented under strategic sense of PSTA, and so I'll leave you with that question.
All right, well, I appreciate that question. There was quite a lot of thought and discussion put into what the goals would be. Where available, they were set based on benchmark data that we had, and based on trend lines for performance that we saw would be reasonable throughout the year. There were other metrics that we've set that didn't have as long a history of benchmark data. So in those cases, we've done our best based on the information that we have. And that is an area that we obviously will be very focused on as we continue setting new goals into future years.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barkley.
Yes, I'd just like to thank Trish Collins and Eric Habner for presenting to the Finance Committee. We did have a good discussion on this, and we look forward to seeing how this plays out as we go through the year to see where we make improvements or retain a high score and work on those areas where we're a little bit below par. So thank you very much. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Commissioner Scott?
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I'd like to say thank staff for all the hard work that went into creating this. I know this was a very, very long process to get to this point, and this is the first time that we've seen this document. Very encouraged by a lot of the things that I see on here, but from a board perspective, I just want to make sure that we keep some of this stuff real. And I'm not criticizing the document in any way, but some of the areas where we scored more points than what was available, you know, in terms of annual budget variance, we scored an 11 out of 10. You know, for this fiscal year, we're doing great, but overall, we know we have some long-term funding issues. You know, for passenger trips per revenue hour, we scored 5.5 out of 5, but long-term, we know we have declining ridership. So I just want to make sure that we're not whitewashing anything here, that we're just keeping it real. And I know this is an evolving process. This is the first time that we've seen it, but I just want to make sure we keep it all in perspective. But thank you very much. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you for your comments. And in reference to what Commissioner Scott just said, I am concerned about, I guess maybe I just don't understand which one of these portals or components addresses the issue of declining ridership. Is there one? Then I'm just missing it because I'm not fully understand the way it's being measured.
Well, the 5 key strategies that the board approved for us to work on, being community support, financial stability, customer satisfaction, employee engagement, and commitment to performance, I think that there are probably components of each of those strategies that address that overarching issue. We, of course, do track our ridership statistics, and we work very hard on monitoring those and coming up with solutions for them. That may not be a direct line item on here, but the efforts that are going into having, you know, good performance in these areas is also contributing to that area.
Well, and I appreciate your response. Thank you very much. I guess my thought is I've really gotten a kick out of looking at this little flyer. I don't know if the rest of you have perused it today, but it occurs to me that this kind of thing is, besides being just so totally necessary if you've tried to get out to the beach on the weekend, the last couple weekends especially, a great way to help drive not only ridership, but people's awareness of how much easier it could be to just ditch your car on the mainland and take the bus or the trolley out there. So I'm just asking for conversation's sake with the board, if might we have missed something in these overall 5 strategic strategies, that we don't have more of these kind of thoughts about how do we drive ridership and how do we raise awareness to those folks who think, oh, I've got to jump in my car, and they're not even thinking about, but it might be a lot easier just to take a bus. So just a thought. Did you, Commissioner Eggers?
Yeah, I agree with your comment about the card. And I think, you know, there should be more conversation at this board about strategies to drive ridership. It's really a simple statement, and yet I feel like we just do all kinds of stuff, and at the end of the day, it's like, what have we actually done to drive ridership? I've talked a little bit about, you know, the rate reductions, and we talked about more communication through these pieces that talk to specific real value-added services, even when we're not in regional premium transit yet. This is just kind of local stuff, but yet it can be pretty powerful if people really understood what it was all about. So I think we ought to be more about driving ridership, and for a lot of reasons. Once we get more riders now, but also to introduce people to transit. We're at 1.5% of the people in our county that use transit. It's like, no, we got to get that up.
Yep.
Again, transitionally oriented, so just a side comment.
Thank you for your comments. And so, Brad, maybe that's an issue based on the comments we're hearing that we could give to one of our committees to really focus on. You can be thinking about which committee it should go to. Commissioner Schulman.
Thank you, Chairwoman. So correct me if I'm wrong, but the passenger trips per revenue hour goal reflects ridership. Is that correct?
That's true.
So looking at our monthly statistics, year-to-date, month-to-date, we're currently at a 19, depending on which exact number you want to use, but about a 19 passenger trip per revenue hour with a stated goal of 17. So it seems like our goals for the year have basically conceded a 10% loss in ridership and said that is 100%. We will get a full score and meet our goal if we have 10% less riders. And I think what I'm hearing is our goal should reflect an attempt to, even in a trend of declining ridership, increase riders through other means. So I think that's kind of what I'm trying to rectify, this inherent, concession that ridership will just automatically be down 10% instead of saying let's set an aspirational goal, take into account things that we don't have control over, but then adding back in the programs that we can to get a goal that might reflect. I mean, currently we're already we're at 19, where we're saying 17 is where we should be, and I realize that's the annual goal. That we should that should drive the goals a little bit more. And I think it was just we just conceded the loss without accepting some new riders along the way.
Excellent point. Thank you very much for that. Anyone else? Anyone else? Thank you for your presentation and all your hard work on this.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Do you have any future meeting subjects other than what we just spoke about that anybody has a burning desire to? Commissioner Scott? Oh, did you?
I have some other business.
Oh, okay. When we get there, Brad, did you have something?
I just wanted to highlight a couple of future meeting subjects, including the one that was just requested. We're already working on the tactics that we are employing or need to employ to increase ridership. And I wanted just to highlight that we are working on exactly this different ways to get more people to ride public transit. This past weekend was very busy with initiatives just like that. As the flyer shows, we started our spring break service in Clearwater. We also had the first spring training game in Dunedin, where we have a free park and ride shuttle, and boy, those Canadians have come to town because they packed the trolleys to the opening day of baseball in Dunedin on Friday with a big long line, and we had to put extra trolleys out there. And similarly, we had a very successful park and ride service in along Tampa Road in Oldsmar, between the hotels, right along our connector route to the BMX race that they had there in Oldsmar over the weekend, and that was also very successful. So we are looking at more and more ways, like the board is suggesting, that we can use our existing services and tie them to ways in which the community might need to avoid congestion or has limited parking and could use a service like this. We're going to have this Friday, and you're all invited, we'll have a first glance look at how the spring break service is doing, because we'll be hosting one of our transit town halls out there on Clearwater Beach at our new transit center this Friday at 2:30 to 3:30. Probably talking to maybe Canadians. I don't know who we're going to talk to out there who are on the beach. And then you're all really invited to join me at bright and early, I think 8:30 in the morning on Saturday morning over in Tampa for our bus rodeo of our competing drivers, competing with and against the Hart drivers. We do this now combined, and we swap every other year, but so this year it's over in Tampa. The winners of the Tampa Bay Rodeo, as we call it, then move on to the state rodeo to compete, and that's going to be held in Daytona this year. And then the international rodeo, the winners of, if they win in the state level, then they go to the national, and that rodeo is actually being held this year in Tampa, or it's actually going to be held right here at PSTA. The APTA International Bus Conference and Rodeo will be at the Hilton in downtown Tampa for the conference, and then the rodeo is going to be actually held in our facility. So drivers from all across the North America will be coming to PSTA to compete.
Do you have a date for that?
I will give you a date on that. I think it's May 10th. What? It's the first weekend in May. It may not be the 10th.
Well, you'll get it to us.
Yeah. We also have a TMA meeting that was mentioned coming up on Friday, March 9th at 9:30. I don't know if any of you know, I know that there was a discussion of moving that meeting to the airport, but I don't know if that actually happened. So I'm not exactly certain where the meeting will be held, but I thought there was an effort to maybe...
That effort continues, but there, as of yesterday, there was no finalization as far as I know. We have someone from Forward Pinellas, your staff member. Jane?
Do you know if it's... Okay. That concludes my report.
All right. Well, as it relates to the park and ride service that we're doing around the county with our different municipalities for the functions that are going on, it occurs to me, if I put my city council hat on, that it would be really critical to get the ridership information from that service to the cities ASAP so they can report it out in their regularly scheduled council meetings. And then when they get ready to get into budget cycle, it might be an opportunity for us to collectively show how much the effort has impacted their city, and perhaps they'd be willing to help subsidize a little bit of it.
That's a great idea.
Just a thought.
That's a great idea. And certainly, that's something that the city of Clearwater has shown great leadership in
I
doing,
know.
in supporting it.
But I heard you mention several other cities that were doing that in
Yeah.
for a variety of reasons. And so that's what we're all about, right, is to try to get people off the roads.
Exactly.
All right, somebody had their light on.
I did, and I
Commissioner,
turned it
Mr.
off.
Jones, you turned it on.
Because I wanted to ask where the TMA meeting was, and
You
just let us know.
We don't know
Okay.
yet. We don't know. We'll certainly be advising everyone when we know. Commissioner Eggers?
Yeah, just final comment? Are we there? Okay. First of all, I do want to say congratulations to our new finance member, new planning member, and to the representation on the MPO. And also just wanted to take the opportunity, as I'm sure many of you feel the same way, to thank Councilmember Johnson, for his work as the representative to the MPO. There are so many adjectives that you can describe folks with, but one of them for Bill has always been about how incredibly hardworking he is on everything and how diligent he is in what he brings to each meeting, whether it's for PSTA, whether it's for MPO or anything else that he sits on. And I know I won't get a chance to say it, but I just wanted to congratulate him for another 2 terms as council member and just say thank you for what you've done for this community, for this board, for MPO. You are a true, excellent representation of what, representing our residents are all about. So I just wanted to tip my hat to him publicly and say thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Eggers. Hold on, wait 1 second. But can you save all those comments? Because he's got another month to go.
Oh, he does? I didn't think he did, but
I will not be at the March,
no.
Make it go.
I will not be sitting here at the March meeting, although I might come back for a plaque or a cup
I'm
of coffee.
sure you'll be coming back. Aren't we meeting in February?
This is February.
Oh, this is February. What am I thinking?
I
My month.
I will be representing PSTA at the Forward Pinellas meeting next month before turning that over.
I'm sure there will be other opportunities, but I just wanted to say it myself. Thank you. And the second thing is that I was a little bit concerned, and maybe we can talk about it at some point, about not accepting motions from the floor as it relates to choosing our members here. I think the fact that our nominating committee does such hard work and presents a nomination, I think is appropriate, but I think we ought to also have an avenue to have motions from the floor, and we can certainly have ballot votes if we need to, but I'd just like to have that conversation at some point. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. And we can absolutely We can absolutely have that conversation, and Counselor, in response to Commissioner Eggers, what is the appropriate time to ask for another motion if somebody wanted to make one? During his report, maybe? I don't know.
No, I mean, the way Robert's rules works is there's a motion pending on the floor. The only motion that can be made at that point is to amend the motion that's on the floor. The board's process for appointment to other boards outside of our committees is to do it by motion. So you could change that process and do it by nomination and allow nominations from the floor, which is what I think.
I didn't necessarily want to get into it today, but I do think it's appropriate that we have that conversation. See what, it may be real simple, like, again, by Robert's rules, what we can do, so, and that would be great, thank you.
All right, thank you. Next is Commissioner Johnson. You had another?
I have a closing comment, if I may.
Oh, we're not just there yet.
Okay.
We have, or maybe we are, Commissioner Eggers, you're still?
I'm finished, thank you.
Oh, you're finished.
Thank you.
All right, then I guess if there's no other business.
Go ahead.
Oh, I apologize. I didn't, you're not lit up? Well,
Oh, I thought I was, I'm sorry.
go ahead.
Okay, now is it good?
Yes.
Okay.
Now you're good.
And then this might have been better under the board comments, I think, but I just want to thank Brad for a good presentation at Tarpon Springs City Commission. He did a great job. I also do represent Safety Harbor and Oldsmar, so Brad, if you could reach out to them if you haven't already, to see if they want that same presentation, and let me know what they say back. I could attend Safety Harbor with you, I believe, but Oldsmar meets the same nights that we do, so. But I think you'd be friendly there, but if you could reach out to those two communities and let me know what they say, if they would like the same presentation. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Commissioner Thornhill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to be a little more clear about the TMA meeting. I said, but currently it is scheduled at FDOT's office in Tampa. And then she'll get that information back to us as to if that's been changed. But that's what's in black and white currently. The other option was to go to the airport. Secondly, I just wanted to point out that I know we don't very often try to use any humor here, but I noticed Commissioner Charlie Justice got pretty excited about that rodeo, and he would like to borrow a bus from Mr. Miller and engage himself in the rodeo. So perhaps you can arrange that. Nevertheless, here we go. We have a comment about the TMA.
I'd be happy to be the PSTA rep.
Sarah Caper, Forward Pinellas. It is going to be confirmed via email, but I have received notice that it's going to be at Tampa International Airport.
Excellent.
So the notice should be going out later today.
A lot more centrally located for everyone. Thank you very much. Commissioner Justice, do you have any more remarks for the good of the order?
No, not really. I wanted to thank those of you that were able to attend the Lellman open house last weekend for our new community center in the Lellman community. And hopefully, and I think we'll see a little bit more driving ridership on Route 75 as it connects people to that new hub of activity.
And especially when we get the new Lillman connector up and running. That'll be very helpful in the community as well. Commissioner Fenger, been very silent today.
Yes, thank you. I just want to say I'm looking forward to serving on the planning board or planning committee again. So thank you for the nomination and appointment.
Good. Thank you. We're looking forward to your report.
Thank you.
Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. In a normal closing comment, I was going to start out by kind of grumping about the gentleman from the St. Pete Housing Authority that came here to talk about losing the service, the 444 service. Because I know that we have had correspondence from them, and I thought that staff had replied. And I know that my personal experience, I think I've ridden the 444 on 6 or 7 different occasions because we've been talking about the closing down that route for so long. And on none of those occasions have we ever had a passenger dropped off at the housing authority. And on many of the occasions, the drivers have said, I go days or weeks without dropping anybody off there. And PSTA and staff have worked real hard to come up with some alternative methods. So I was kind of frustrated with that. But on the other hand, I'm really happy that he came and talked about it, because it illustrates something that I think is really important, and it's the term we use, transit-oriented development. And some of that means that if you are a business or you are a service, you have an obligation of locating on a transit route if your customers are likely going to be transit accessible to you. We didn't do that in one instances in the city of Clearwater, and I wish we had done differently. But that location, if you haven't been there, it's on Park Boulevard, and it's essentially an expressway going by. There's no real walkability to it. And so I think that we at PSTA, or you folks, because you're going to be here, have an obligation to go out to the community and talk to them about locating their businesses for accessibility of employees. So people don't have to live in Pasco County and drive here if there's a way to be more efficient. So I wanted to go on record. I think that's real important. I'm going to talk to Forward Pinellas about the same thing, because I think it's in their wheelhouse too. So thank you, Madam Chair.
You're very welcome. Commissioner Johnson. Nothing? Okay.
Nothing.
Mr. Barkley?
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I'd like to congratulate Richard Bennett for being named to full status on the Finance Committee, and Josh Schulman for being named to full status on the Planning Committee, and looking forward to the input from Commissioner Fenger as alternate. And I also want to congratulate us on the passage of the RTFP resolution and the amended MOU, because this is a big step towards moving us forward and showing our leadership in the region for public transit.
Thank you. Very well said. Commissioner Scott?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've got some comments that I was going to do in other business, but I can do them now.
Oh, there you go. You're good.
Thank you. And it relates to, specifically to the BMX park and ride shuttle that we did this past weekend, but more broadly to free service that we may offer in the future in general. So first of all, I want to preface my comments by stating that I'm not criticizing what was done. I understand the city's desire to have a successful event, and from a community investment standpoint, there may be some merit in providing free services to certain human service agencies, or also to certain events that may provide economic stimulus to the area. I was caught a little bit off guard on this because I saw it on Fox 13, and it brought up some questions to me about process, protocol, and precedent about how we handle requests for free service. And with our limited resources already strained to provide our basic transit services, as we heard this morning from Route 44, how that has affected the St. Pete Housing Authority. We heard from Mr. Homans today about that we're number 2 in suburban poverty in the Tampa Bay area, and only 60% of the population can reach a job in 90 minutes if they're using transit. I'm questioning the process or lack of process that was used to determine the merits of providing free service that was provided to a for-profit event such as BMX. Does PSTA have a policy that addresses free service requests? Who ultimately has the final say in deciding which events to donate services for? What made this event worthy of PSTA free service over other events such as perhaps the Valspar Championship or the St. Pete Grand Prix that undoubtedly have economic significance to the community? And ultimately, is the free service outside our core transit responsibility, and is it consistent with our mission? So based on the published 3-day schedule that I saw, a bus or buses operated between Oldsmar City Hall, BMX Park, and 2 hotels every 30 minutes. BMX Park is not currently on Route 67 that runs through Oldsmar, and from what I can tell, is not a stop on any current PSTA route that I can find. I may be wrong on that, and if I am, somebody can correct me, but If it's not, then that defined this park and ride as a true dedicated yet free service that operated 33.5 revenue hours per vehicle over the 3-day period. At PSTA's currently hourly operational cost of $107 per hour, based on the scorecard that we reviewed at the Finance Committee last week, that puts this agency sponsorship at $3,584 per vehicle, which is significant, especially when viewed through the lens of charging property owners the highest millage based on the premise that additional funds were essential to providing our most basic transit services. A dedicated and completely free special event park and ride is hardly providing basic transit services. Furthermore, it is noteworthy that PSTA has contracts in place with private providers such as Jolly Trolley that can operate the same service for up to 40% less per operational hour. With our transit system already lacking service coverage and frequency, and with ridership continuing to decline, is this in fact the best investment of our resources? If we have extra funds, shouldn't we be applying those to providing more frequent service to boost ridership and continue demonstrating the value of transit to those riders who are largely transit dependent or looking for other alternate means of transportation for a variety of reasons? With this board ultimately accountable to the taxpayers and the transit riding public, the board should be the final arbitrators involved in all decisions relating to free service requests, just as we are when it comes to all fare adjustments and special fare programs. This should be especially true when the request involves deviations from our core mission by diverting limited resources to sponsoring for-profit special events. If PSTA does not provide free service to the next special event that requested, are we adversely discriminating? Or will we be honoring all such requests for free service in the future, and do we need to budget accordingly for that? Finally, the board needs to understand the impact that all free service requests have on the private transportation sector, whose employees depend on the opportunity to provide shuttle service to community events, not unlike restaurants, hotels, and private parking facilities that enjoy the good fortune of the positive economic impact special events bring to the region. As such, this board should recognize that as essential as public transit is to this community, private transportation providers have the same essential benefit to this community, as well as an important component to travel and tourism. So I think ultimately, and I'm almost done here, I know everybody's looking at their watch, a couple of questions I think need to be answered. What is our current policy and who has the final say? What was the fiscal impact to PSA of that service? If a policy exists, I believe it should be amended to allow for board oversight and approval of all free service requests. And if no policy exists, I believe one needs to be created. So that concludes my comments. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Mr. Scott. I have a question for you.
Okay.
I'm assuming that you did that from a written document, correct?
Mm-hmm.
I would appreciate it very much if you wouldn't mind sharing that document with the rest of us.
Sure.
There were several questions that you asked in there that caused my mind to think in different ways. And I would like, with everyone's permission, to refer the document to our Finance Committee to take a look at all those questions that you've asked and figure out what are the other sources of revenue that could be potentially available to help offset the cost of that, what is now a free service, where we're trying to raise awareness and drive ridership. And I do believe that those metrics, Brad, from when we get done with that particular service, let's just pick, for example, the one that the little flyer speaks to. When we know what the ridership numbers were and what the cost of that is, I think that would give us some very good, sound data to be able to apply for or receive additional funding. So thank you for your thoughtfulness, and please make sure we all get a copy of that.
I will give it to Brett.
Okay, Commissioner Eggers.
Oh, I'm finished.
No comments?
I just had a couple, and I just gave them to you, and I'm done. I've talked too much anyway.
Commissioner, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to state that when Tony Love came in from St. Pete Housing Authority, I have spoken with him a couple of times, and he stated that the reason that the Housing Authority did not even know about the change to the 444 is because they were never notified. He was told that the notices were put on the buses and nothing ever came to his office. And when we were given the presentation, I don't recall being told about it goes by the St. Pete Housing Authority. I remember we were focusing basically on the riders on the north that were trying to get to Walmart. And so while we have come to a solution for that piece, I'm hoping that we can come to a solution, even if it's 4 or 5 riders. Those are the most vulnerable, some of the most vulnerable, and they still need to get to the housing authority, even if it's only 4 or 5 that ride that bus. Thank you. And I hope we can have a follow-up on what happens.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown, and I'm sure that Cassandra went out to talk to the gentleman, did you not? Yes. And we'll find some kind of a solution, because I think that's important as well. Thank you for your comments.
Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome. Commissioner Schulman?
Nothing to add.
Nothing for the good of the order. Commissioner Bennett? You've been silent today, too.
Oh, can't get the light on.
It's on. It's
Okay.
on. You're recognized.
Well, I want to thank you very much for having enough confidence in me to make me a full member of the Financial Committee, and I'm sure that we will continue to operate with the budget allocated. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. No one else has any other issues or comments? And for the good of the order, then, we are adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.
Yes.
Thank you. Great job.
Okay.
Finally got it together.
I know, right?
You can take that over.
It was, oh my God, Alan, between that attorney, I was ready to strangle him.
My question is like, so let's say you're the state of Washington rodeo champions. You're going to drive your bus all the way across the country to Tampa, Florida?
That's my very first question. Do we take buses all the way over there to beat their own buses?
I will check to make sure I have it.
You ever see some of those?
I think I do.
You don't take your own thing. You issue.
Thank you.
You're having a bike, you got a ride. It's all about you, not about that. But yeah, that'd be interesting. Different buses.
Well, it just seems like a lot of waste of fuel.
Absolutely.
Beyond the money part of it, the fuel.
I don't think I can.
Do they get paid?
My last day.
I would like to be, yeah.
Well, you tell me whether I need to be here or not, so that's fine.
No, I definitely want to.
Oh, okay.
Okay, give me a moment.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay, thanks.
Hey,
Chair.
Because-
Bill, you gotta figure out a way to get on some other committee. Keep checking.
You think I do? I know I'm going off the
Good
payroll.
things, yes, you know, I
on
don't
the
think you
18th
glue your hair down, man.
Yeah.
If I
That's-
was in your chief,
That's all I do. That's
I would,
fine.
I would look like,
To comb your hair?
Artie Gordon.
Oh, yes, you do.
And him too.
Yes, you do. You
So
have
the,
contact information.
you know, when's the election?
The election is actually the 13th.
Really?
13.
The
For you is,
Okay.
Board of Canvassers is on the Friday after the election, which is,
I don't think so, but I don't think it's.
what, the 15th?
I'm glad that.
Yeah, right,
So
yeah.
the swearing in of the new council member is on Monday, the 19th. And they're doing it in a, they're just coming in and they're doing it in the clerk's office.
Oh, okay. Well, so the city will not appoint a new member for
He had it in us.
before March 15th.
Yeah.
That is definitely correct.
Don't you worry, I'm all over.
Well, with Alan,
Rachel.
but,
Yeah, you guys just let me know. Otherwise, I'll come and get my plaque, because
Yeah.
I want a plaque.
because you already have your free pass, right?
Don't you
I think I do. Rachel wanted me to verify that.
What's your free pass?
Soon we're gonna,
Is that your free pass right there? Can you get that?
yeah.
No. I
No,
mean,
but then the
I'll
board
turn
members-
this in, because, I mean, it'd be nice if
Yeah, I was afraid
I
that.
need to use the restroom if I need to.
But,
For 1 second.
He was doing whatever he wanted. He acted like he was the,
It's from England, what can I tell you, they do things
just be
different
careful
over there.
because if there becomes an expose, I don't want you to get,
I will call you as soon as I know.
that's where they're going.
Thank you.
That'll be the next career source and
Uh-huh. I couldn't agree more. Maybe I should.
well, that would be good.
You know what I'm saying? Did you go to your
There's just, he'd have a field day up there.
Huh?
He'd have a field day up
Oh,
there.
yeah.
Wouldn't she? Yeah. Well, and Commissioner Starkey.